Chapter 76. With a thought, he opened the system interface in his mind. Target reputation, 85694/100000. Sure enough, his reputation began to skyrocket with the emergence of this newspaper. Compared with the last time of 10,186, it has now increased 8 times. And he was still jumping up at a speed visible to the naked eye. Karen estimates that it will take less than 30 minutes for his reputation to reach the 100,000 mark, and he will be able to hold another lottery. Why didn't I expect that to increase my reputation? I don't necessarily have to rely on bounties. It seems to be easier to spread through newsbirds. It seems that I will be in the headlines frequently in the future. Make your debut, boy. Thinking of this, Karen's heart felt hot. Maybe, I should try to contact Morgans. After all, Morgans is the president of the World Economic News Agency and controls a large number of newsbirds. Karen cleared her throat and said to Jun, "Do you know how to contact Morgans?" Jun shook his head, "I don't know, he is very mysterious. He will only be seen in some major events." "Do you want him to stop publishing this news?" "No, I want him to spread the word more." Karen was a little disappointed. "Okay. Bulu bulu." The sound of a phone bug interrupted the conversation between the two. "What a brave boy! You dare to resist the world government. You are worthy of being my nephew." As soon as he picked up the phone, Garp's excited voice came from the phone. As a marine hero, Garp has always adhered to his beliefs. He didn't like those corrupt celestial dragons, so he refused the opportunity to be promoted to general many times. Therefore, he expressed great appreciation for Karen, who dared to challenge the authority of the world government. Jun held his forehead speechlessly, then turned around and went to take care of Yudo with Delica. Karen walked toward the deck with the phone bug in hand. "Lieutenant General Garp, you are joking. You should have read the content. It is not as exaggerated as the title," Karen said modestly. However, at this moment, he was surprised to find that the phone bug in his hand had stretched out a finger at some point and dug up right at the nostril. This surprised him, but also found it a bit funny. The phone bug is really a wonderful creature that can not only convey sounds, but also imitate the facial expressions on the other end of the phone. "Ha ha 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 ha, I don't care, you are really what I like." Garp on the other end of the phone smiled heartily, and his laughter revealed his recognition and love for Karen. "Where are you now?" Garp asked suddenly, with a hint of concern in his tone. Karen thought for a while and replied, "I just left Sunday Island and there are still a few days left before Branch 198. Branch 198 is the marine branch closest to Srili town, and it was people from this branch who sent Karen to the marine headquarters." "Well, I'm not that far away from Branch 198 now," Garp said carelessly. Karen was moved and asked, "How did you get to the 198th branch? You're not the old boy like Warring States and Zifa. I'm afraid that the world government will send people to target you, so let me protect you in the East Blue Sea these days." When Garp said this, he had a helpless expression on his face. Hearing Garp's words, Karen felt a surge of warmth in her heart. She never expected that Zifa would ask Garp to protect him. Although he felt it was unnecessary, it was Zifa and Garp's kindness after all, so he thanked him. "Thank you, Lieutenant General Garp. Stop talking nonsense, brat. I'll have a good chat with you when I get to Branch 198. Garp shouted. Karen smiled and replied, "Okay, Lieutenant General Garp, I look forward to seeing you again." Gaba. The phone bug was hung up. Karen stared blankly at the rough sea. There are people who care about me in this world. This feels so good. Ding, congratulations on qualifying for a lottery draw. The system prompts sounded in Karen's mind. With a thought, he opened the system interface in his mind. Target reputation, 102587/10000000. In just the past 10 minutes, he achieved his goal this time, which was faster than Karen predicted. By this time, he had drawn prizes 3 times in total. The first time was unparalleled skill, which was of great help to Karen, whether it was training or fighting. Then there is a 100% chance of being caught with bare hands. As a conceptual rule skill, even the red-haired Shanks will be controlled. Lastly is the most recent acquisition, Gourmet. Unlike the first 2 items, this ability does not have a detailed explanation. The current position seems to have no other effect besides giving Karen good cooking skills. What will happen next needs to be developed again. This time he was in a much more relaxed mood than the previous draws. Lottery. Ding, congratulations to host for winning the title, Fishing Man. Title? What the hell is this? Anglers will never be in the Air Force? But who in this world makes a living by fishing? Can't I just go into the sea? Now it's better, I changed from a chef to a fisherman. And, what does the title mean? I don't think there's anything weird on my head. Monk Karen Jonger couldn't figure out why he felt less reliable than a gourmet. Hello, where are my instructions? Karen wanted to cry but had no tears. He felt that there would be no such thing as an instruction manual for anything he picked up in the future. For 100,000 reputation, I will give you this thing. RNM, refund. The morning light first appeared, an array of sunlight penetrated the thin morning mist and gently sprinkled on the sea. A warship is sailing steadily, its hull swaying gently with the waves. Karen and Jun were lying on the deck chairs on the second floor, feeling the warmth from the sun. In the field of vision of the two men, there was also a vaguely visible warship. It was a warship with a huge dog's head in front. Very distinctive, it's Garp's boat. It's coming. Jun suddenly reminded him. Karen nodded and said nothing. In fact, he didn't have any strong feelings for Srilly Town. After all, he only stayed in that town for 2 days before he was massacred by pirates. But he could never forget the old face that made him hide. The old man who once protected him. He felt that since he had taken over this body, he would have to bear everything about it, whether it was hatred or, that precious family affection. So he came back with a gift. It was something he had carefully prepared. Jun looked at Karen blankly, and suddenly saw sadness and excitement on his face. Sadness and excitement were intertwined, and these two completely opposite emotions appeared on one person's face at the same time. She tried to understand Karen's inner thoughts, but she found it elusive. Karen at this moment seemed to have become a mystery full of contradictions. Karen stared at the blurry island in the distance. He smiled. Back. Chapter 77. Memorial. As the warship approached the port of Sri town, Karen and Jun led everyone to board the land destroyed by pirates in an orderly manner. As soon as they landed, they saw Garp and a group of marines waiting on the pier of the port. When Karen got closer, he realized that Garp was not waiting for him, but standing there sleeping. He didn't even seem to notice Karen's arrival, and he didn't know if it was intentional. This made him feel a little funny. Lieutenant General Garp was indeed the same as in the animation, so nervous. Karen coughed lightly, and then, Garp still didn't respond. Karen had no choice but to reach out and shake Garp awake. Garp opened his eyes suddenly, and when he saw it was Karen, he immediately smiled and punched Karen lightly on the chest. Good boy, he has a lot of potential. Why does it hurt so much? This old bastard couldn't have used his weapons, but I didn't see any dirty tricks. Could it be that he would conquerors? Karen felt the strength coming from Garp's hand and had some vague speculations in his mind. No matter where you are, this is what I should do. I believe you will make the same choice there. Karen laughed dryly and happily accepted Garp's praise. Garp said carelessly, that's right, I've long been unhappy with the Tianlong people. Jun, who was standing beside Karen, rolled his eyes at the two of them and sighed helplessly. You two, forget it. Anyway, if the sky falls, the taller one will be able to stop it. Ha ha ha, Jun Chan is right, let that Sengoku guy worry about these annoying things. Garp smiled heartily, and then suddenly glanced at the card in Jun's hand. Immediately, his mouth opened wide, and his eyes kept moving on Jun and Karen. You, how come you are so fast? You already have children? And they are all so old. Jun's face was full of black lines. Little Garp, what are you thinking? Karen and I have only been at sea for less than a month, how can it be our child? Why do you say it's us so naturally? Does that mean she doesn't object to having a child with me? Karen was thinking wildly in her mind. How is it impossible? It's possible that she was already pregnant in Malinfando. Garp smacked his lips and secretly gave Karen a thumbs up, but even Jessie, who was standing behind Karen, saw that little gesture, not to mention Jun. Jun's cheeks turned slightly red. I told you no, but Yuta is already 2 years old. 2 years old? Garp bent down and took a closer look at Yuta, and muttered in a low voice, 2 years old is not impossible, after all. Then, his expression became serious and he did not say what he had not finished. He stretched out his hand and tapped Yuda's round face. Yuda opened his eyes wide, looked at the strange old man in front of him curiously, and laughed out loud. Jun quickly stopped Garp's movement. She was afraid that Garp would make Yuda cry. He was rescued by Karen on a pirate ship. She no longer had her parents, so Karen temporarily adopted her. What do you mean Karen adopted her? Shouldn't it be us? I misjudged you. You really don't want to take this responsibility. The more Karen listened, the more wrong she became, but she didn't refute it. So that's it, so she is Karen's adopted daughter. Garp looked excited. Since she is Karen's adopted daughter, then she is also my granddaughter. It's obvious that Garp loves children. Call Grandpa and listen. Garp looked at Yuda expectantly. She is only 2 years old, how can she? Yeah. Ah. Haha, so good. Garp beamed. It turns out that children can talk at the age of 2. Karen and Jun looked at each other and saw shock in each other's eyes. Neither of them had experience as parents, and both of them felt a little ashamed for a moment. It seems that there is time to teach Yuda some words, or to find an experienced nanny, otherwise it will be up to me to figure out what kind of Yuda will be taught. Karen reflected secretly and made a decision in his heart. Garp teased Yuda for a while longer, then raised his head again and smiled at Karen. How long do you plan to stay here? Soon. Karen waved to Jessie, who was holding 2 boxes wrapped in black cloth. Inside are the heads of Beard, the captain of the Blade Pirates, and Scott, his first mate. This is his carefully prepared gift for the town of Srili. Karen reached out and took it, and could still feel the slightest coolness from it. In order to prevent rot, he froze it. Srili town was originally a very peaceful and beautiful town. However, with their arrival, this peaceful corner instantly became devastated. The houses in the town were burned down during looting, and the joy and laughter of the past turned into fear and despair, leaving only broken walls and streets overgrown with grass. But time is a wonderful healer. As the years go by, the town of Srili is gradually swallowed up by nature, and the sadness of the past is diluted in the embrace of nature. The dilapidated houses were covered with vines, and wild flowers grew from the cracks in the walls, blooming with the tenacity of life. Although there are still many ruins left in Srili town today, there is a hint of vitality in the silence. But now I don't want to give this gift. They don't deserve to stay in this peaceful and beautiful place, and I don't want these 2 scum to disturb their rest. Karen handed the 2 boxes to Jessie and ordered, just find a place to throw them away during the next flight. Yes, Colonel. Jessie took the box and stepped behind Karen. I want to go to the cemetery to pay my respects, and then leave here. Maybe I won't come back again. How about I accompany you? Jun looked at Karen worriedly. No need, I can do it myself. Karen turned around and walked deeper into the town alone. Karen didn't walk very fast. He was thinking about things as he walked. It took him half an hour to reach the cemetery. It was the cemetery that Durag helped him build. Because he couldn't tell whose body belonged to them, they were buried together. The cemetery is small and very simple. Because no one is taking care of it, it is surrounded by weeds and looks a bit desolate. I am coming. He walked to a nearby tombstone, stretched out his hand and touched it gently, and suddenly felt an indescribable sadness in his heart. Then, this feeling of sadness suddenly disappeared, followed by a feeling of extraordinary indifference. He suddenly felt that his whole soul was sublimating. After being stunned for a moment, he grinned. Thanks. Chapter 78. Banquet. Srili Town Port Pier. Tent after tent was placed neatly on the beach by the sea. Between the tents, smoke curled up, carrying a faint salty and sea smell, which made people feel a unique atmosphere. At this time, the sun has set, night is gradually falling, and the whole world is beginning to be shrouded in darkness. However, in this darkness, a dazzling golden light suddenly rose up. With the appearance of golden light, there is also a strong aroma of rice, which directly grabs everyone's heart. The aroma is like an invisible hand, gently stroking people's taste buds, making their saliva flow out unconsciously. In the center of the beach, a group of Marines gathered around a bonfire, staring intently at the dinner plate in Karen's hand. The Colonel's cooking skills are so good. Every time I smell it, it makes me salivate. It's a pity that I can't taste the food cooked by the colonel in person. It is said that only a very small number of people on our warship have tasted the food cooked by the colonel. After eating, they all praised the food cooked by the colonel. There is no way. After all, the colonel is only one person, so he definitely can't cook so much food. And now that Chef Saxton is learning from the colonel, the food he cooks is getting more and more delicious. The Marines who were watching were talking a lot. Although they had long been accustomed to this, they still couldn't help but marvel every time they saw the golden light rising into the sky and smelled the rich aroma of rice. On the other side of the beach, Garp held his stomach, grabbed a handful of senbei and put it into his mouth, and asked vaguely to Bogart next to him. "Why does it smell so good? Who is cooking tonight?" Bogart also felt his stomach protesting. He frowned slightly and said, "I remember Karen and the others are holding a banquet tonight. It may be because of the smell of rice coming from there. This bastard didn't even call me when he held a banquet." Garp was indignant and felt that the senbei in his hand was not as delicious as before. Dong dong dong. At this moment, a knock on the door interrupted their conversation. Bogart and Garp looked at each other, and then Bogart stood up and walked to the door. He opened the gate of opening and was greeted by Karen, with a bright smile on his face and a pink apron. Garp glanced at Karen's apron strangely and asked doubtfully, "Can you cook?" "Know a little bit, have hobbies." "Okay, Lieutenant General Garp, and Adjutant Bogart, the banquet has already begun. We have prepared a lot of delicious food tonight, come and join the banquet." Garp's eyes lit up instantly. "Good boy, luckily you didn't forget me. I'm very hungry. Let's go quickly." "Does this mean I have become a good boy? I heard you calling me a bastard before entering the door. It changes so quickly." Karen cursed in his heart and smiled gently. "Then let's go. It would be a shame to miss the delicious food." When they returned to the banquet again, the place was already full of people. Among the lively crowd, there were several busy figures coming in and out of the kitchen. Naturally, the food they moved was not the food made by Karen himself, but the food copied by the chefs led by Saxton. Although it was not as delicious as Karen's own food, it was still very delicious and had no side effects. "Oh my god, I have never smelled such a rich aroma of rice in my life. I really envy you." The person who said this was the Marine on the Garp warship. It was the first time for them to smell such a strong aroma of rice. "Hee, we can eat it every day." The soldiers on the Karen warship looked proud. "Not only that, we sometimes hear Miss Delica singing. I swear, it's the most beautiful singing voice in the world." Just as she was talking, Delica walked over lightly wearing a dark blue skirt. Her steps were elegant, with a unique rhythm in each step, as if she was dancing a silent dance. Different from her performance in Shark Night, here, you can clearly feel her natural and relaxed atmosphere. Of course, this was not what Karen asked her to do, but what Delica herself asked for. According to her, this was to express her gratitude to Karen for taking her in. "Delica! Delica!" Laughter mixed with singing filled the place with a joyful atmosphere. "Wow, it's so delicious!" Garp held a piece of barbecue in each hand that was much bigger than his face, with a satisfied look on his face. Even his adjutant Bogart was holding a large piece of barbecue. His posture was much more elegant than Garp. Suddenly, Garp closed his eyes tightly, and his nose was shaking wildly, as if he was trying to catch the delicious smell floating in the air. He looked just like an old dog that smelled the smell of rice. No, although this barbecue is also delicious, the aroma of meat floating in the air is stronger than the barbecue in my hand. He suddenly opened his eyes and stared at Karen with burning eyes. "Do you have something more delicious that you haven't brought out yet?" Although he was questioning, his tone was indeed very affirmative. As he spoke, regardless of Karen's reaction, he began to twitch his nose again and slowly walked towards the center of the banquet, guided by the smell of meat. Karen secretly said something bad. He didn't expect Garp's nose to be so sharp. If Garp eats the food he cooked, Karen couldn't help but shudder. While Karen was thinking, he glanced out of the corner of his eye and discovered that Garp had arrived at the place where he had placed the food. Garp stood next to a round table. He opened his eyes and stared at the covered food. It was a large plate with a silver dinner plate covering it. He stretched out his hand and slowly opened the hijab, and a dazzling light flickered on and off the plate. "You can't eat this." Karen ducked in front of Garp and stretched out his hand to stop Garp's next move. Garp stared at Karen and yelled dissatisfied, "You bastard, you hid some delicious food and you didn't let me eat it when I found it. This is really inedible." Karen smiled bitterly. "Why can't you eat it? Food is meant to be eaten." Garp looked unhappy. "You can't eat this here. You can take it to your room to eat later." Karen noticed that he and Garp were being watched by more and more people, so he changed his tune. At the very least, Garp couldn't lose his composure in front of so many Marines. "That means it's edible, right?" Garp's eyes lit up and he grasped the key point. "Yes, but here." Before Karen could finish speaking, Garp quickly opened the hijab covering it. In an instant, a dazzling light shot straight into the sky, and a richer smell of meat reached everyone's heavenly heads. Garp stared at this scene blankly. Immediately, a greedy expression appeared on his face, and his mouth kept drooling. His eyes were like twinkling stars, and his face was full of excitement and anticipation, as if there was only that plate of delicious food left in the whole world. Garp exclaimed excitedly, clenching his hands unconsciously, as if he couldn't wait to pounce on the food. "Wow, ha ha ha, this is so delicious, I want to eat it now." It's over. Chapter 79. Green Beans. Pang. Ah. Under the gaze of all the recruits in the room, Garp quickly tore into a piece of barbecue, looking like a hungry beast without caring about the surrounding eyes. The moment the roast meat entered his stomach, his shirt exploded. The corners of his mouth were covered with grease, and he kept moaning. A Marine soldier on the side asked, "Lieutenant General Garp, what's going on?" "No need to ask. The barbecue must be too delicious." "Don't worry. Lieutenant General Garp sometimes eats delicious food and will be so careless. We have long been used to it." Those who said this were the soldiers on the Garp warship. They seemed to have been accustomed to Garp being like this for a long time. "But I have never seen Lieutenant General Garp lose his temper like this. He even stretched out his clothes. He is indeed Lieutenant General Garp." "I see." The soldier who asked the question at first suddenly realized. Only a few insiders who had eaten Karen's food were hesitant to speak, and at the same time they looked forward to what would happen next. Karen looked at Garp helplessly. He didn't expect that Garp would lose his composure in public even after eating a meal cooked by him. "That's funny, Karen." Bogart smiled helplessly and explained, "Sorry, Lieutenant General Garp can't control himself when he sees delicious food." Karen opened her mouth, wanting to tell him that it was because Garp ate his own food that this happened, but in the end he didn't speak. "Anyway, I have stopped it, everyone has seen it, it is not my fault. Since it's irreversible, so be it." Garp groaned like this for a few seconds, and then he began to twist his body in a very weird way. The posture is enchanting, the eyes are blurred, and the words are, wanton. Even Bogart, who was standing next to him, couldn't hold back. He and Garp had been at the sea together for so many years, and he had never seen Garp behave like this. "Is it really that delicious? Although that plate of barbecue smells really good." Bogart shook his head. In order to prevent Garp from being too embarrassed in front of everyone, he couldn't help but remind him. "Lieutenant General Garp." At this moment, Garp suddenly said with enjoyment, "Ah! This barbecue is so fragrant. It's an intoxicating taste. The crispiness of the outside is intertwined with the tender meat inside. I can't help but want to taste it one bite after another. This barbecue has an unprecedented taste. The meat is tender and juicy. The moment you bite into it, the meat juice bursts out in your mouth, and the warm taste jumps on the tip of your tongue. When paired with the special sauce, the slight spiciness and aroma complement each other, making every bite full of texture." Bogart looked at Garp in astonishment, and then looked at Karen, vaguely feeling that something was wrong. Based on his understanding of Garp, the most he could say about Garp was delicious, but today his review was so professional. Garp's comments continued. He grabbed his hair and lay directly on the ground, with tears still glistening in his eyes. "This is the taste, this is the desire for barbecue in my heart. This hot feeling shocked me like never before." Then, he suddenly raised his right hand and shouted, "I declare, tonight's god of cookery is Tang Niu." The corner of Karen's mouth twitched crazily. "No, why did you change the script?" Garp's last shout was so loud that almost everyone present heard it. They looked at Garp blankly. Even Dalika, who was singing on the side, stopped singing. She also had a curious look on her face. They secretly marveled in their hearts. As expected of Lieutenant General Garp, to be able to speak with such professional skills. But what is Tang Niu? Finally, a soldier couldn't help but ask. Who is Tang Niu? An older marine standing next to him guessed, I think Tang Niu is not a human being. How is it possible? Lieutenant General Garp said that Tang Niu is the god of cookery. Another soldier retorted. He heard Garp shouting that Tang Niu was the god of cookery. The older marine just now shook his head, with a wise light in his eyes. We all know that the food on the round table was cooked by Colonel Cullen, and after finishing the meal, Lieutenant General Garp shouted, Tang Niu is the god of food, so, Tang Niu should be the name of the ingredient, which means that the barbecue Colonel Garp eats is made from a type of cow called Tang Niu. I see. The soldiers around felt that what he said made sense, and they all made mental notes about the cow called Tang Niu. Ahem, what's wrong? Why are you so quiet? Garp stood up from the ground in a daze, with tears clearly visible in his eyes. Bogart looked weird, you just. After a pause, he swallowed and continued. What did you think just now? Garp scratched the back of his head and said doubtfully, what about it? I think it's good. I mean, what did you think of the barbecue just now? Garp closed his eyes and began to reminisce, then he nodded seriously, I think it's delicious. This is definitely the most delicious barbecue I have ever eaten. Bogart breathed a sigh of relief, now that he knew Garp. Everyone is looking at me. Garp frowned slightly, with a confused expression on his face, did I say something wrong? No, Bogart waved his hand quickly, holding back his smile, I just didn't expect you to evaluate this barbecue so seriously. Ah. Garp was a little confused, and then he answered confidently, ha ha ha, of course, I am very professional when it comes to delicious food. Karen was speechless looking at the two people who were not on the same channel. He cleared his throat and said in a deep voice to everyone, okay, you can do whatever you need to do. Then, Karen smiled apologetically at Garp and Bogart. I'll excuse you for a moment. With that said, he quickly ran to the kitchen. He had an idea in his mind that needed to be verified. After entering the kitchen, Karen was attracted by the busy people, but they didn't seem to notice him. He quietly walked to the ingredients area, grabbed a handful of green beans, and then came to an empty stove. He poured some oil into the pot, and when the oil was hot, he gently poured the green beans in. With a crackling sound, the green beans began to jump in the pot. Karen skillfully stir-fries so that every green bean is evenly heated. After a while, the green beans gradually became ripe, and their color changed from light green to dark green. Karen scooped them out with a slotted spoon and placed them on a plate aside. Finally, he glanced at the busy people around him and left the kitchen with the plate of green beans. Back in his bedroom, he looked at the plate of green beans and fell into deep thought. This should be considered to be made by himself. Karen grabbed a green bean, hesitated for a moment, and then slowly put the green bean into his mouth. After a while, Karen's voice of exclamation rang out from his room. How could it be so chewy? The texture of green beans is crisp and tender, with a refreshing sweetness in every bite, as if telling the story of spring. It not only retains the deliciousness of the beans, but also the slightest hint of sweetness. Chewy, really makes me. Chapter 80. On the sparkling sea, two warships sailed side by side. Karen did not stay in Srili town for long. After just one night, he and Garp started a new voyage. This is already their second day of starting again. The target is Windmill Village. Windmill Village is located in the eastern part of the Kingdom of Goa, where Luffy grew up in the village. It was here that Luffy met Shanks, Ace, and Sabo from the red-haired pirates. Even Yuta met Luffy in Windmill Village. Fate is amazing, and it seems to be the same this time. Karen was sitting on the deck of the first floor, wearing a sun hat and holding a delicate fishing rod in his hand, staring at the sea with burning eyes. He still doesn't know the purpose of his title of fishing man. I remember you don't like fishing. Next to him is naturally Jun. Karen didn't even look back, still focusing on the sea. The fishing rod in his hand swayed slightly with the waves, and the fishing line swayed gently in the sea breeze. It's so boring at sea, so I can only develop my own hobbies. Jun stretched his body lazily and inadvertently exposed a pair of long, snow-white legs, which made people think. She turned her head, looked at Karen, and asked casually. Why don't you let Garp help you train? The corner of Karen's mouth twitched slightly, and he slowly turned his head. Ben's handsome face now became bruised and swollen, and even a big bump appeared on his head. After he explained to Garp what happened that day, Garp pulled him into a special training in the name of love. You brat, let me give you a taste of my loving fist today. As he spoke, Garp's attacks hit him like a gust of wind, punching to the flesh, and each blow contained endless power. Although Karen tried her best to resist, it was still difficult to withstand Garp's terrifying offensive. Ah! Pang! It hurts. Don't slap me in the face. Pang! I'm angry. Pang! Screams and the sound of bodies colliding one after another. Jun looked at Karen with a bruised nose and swollen face, and couldn't help laughing. No matter how many times she watched it, she couldn't help laughing every time she saw Karen's current appearance. Karen glared at Jun with resentment, then turned back and stared at the fishing rod in his hand. That guy Luffy seems to have been beaten by Garp like this since he was a child. Old bastard, when I learn conquerors, I will beat him back, Karen muttered to himself. No wonder Wang Luffy doesn't want to be a marine, education with sticks won't work. What are you mumbling about? Jun asked curiously. No. It's nothing. Karen changed the subject with a guilty conscience, it's just that I've been fishing for such a long time, why is there no movement at all? Is my title a fake? I was the fisherman I promised, but why haven't I caught fish for so long? Karen felt that he had been deceived by the system. Don't worry, you can't rush things like fishing. Jun smiled slightly and said softly, fishing requires patience. The more anxious you are, the harder it is to catch. Look at me, calm down, it doesn't matter if you have the skills to catch the fish. Karen looked at the wooden barrel at the foot of Jun. From time to time, a fish jumped out of the water. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. No, who is the fisherman after all? They obviously set the hook together, why didn't mine take the bait? At this moment, Karen suddenly felt his fishing rod react. It bent slightly and the line began to tremble. His heartbeat suddenly accelerated, and he grabbed the fishing rod suddenly, his eyes flashing with excitement. Coming! I feel it! Jun was also attracted by his reaction, sat up and looked at him expectantly. Karen concentrated her energy and suddenly lifted the boom. Wow! Karen looked closely and saw that what he caught turned out to be a wooden barrel. What kind of fish is it? Jun asked curiously. Karen shook his head, pointed to the barrel on the ground, and said with a wry smile, it's not a fish, it's a barrel. Karen stretched out his hand and gave it a slight split, causing the barrel to fall apart instantly. Then Karen fell into a daze, because what he saw was very familiar to him. How is it possible? It turned out to be spicy strips. The writing on it is still in Chinese characters. It's still Wolong's big gluten dish, this one is more famous. This brand cannot exist in this world, why would such a thing appear? Karen stared blankly at the spicy strips inside, a little surprised. Have you seen this packaging? Just in case, Karen decided to ask Jun. Jun took a package and looked at it carefully for a long time, then she shook her head. I've never seen it before. It smells like food. As she spoke, she opened the spicy strips, and a spicy smell hit her face. The unique seasonings and spices were mixed together, exuding an alluring smell. Smelling this familiar smell, Karen was in a trance. It's really something from that world. Jun smelled it and then asked curiously, is this food? Can it be eaten? Karen's thoughts were surging and he replied casually, yes, you can eat it. Seeing that Jun was about to bite the spicy stick, Karen quickly recovered and stopped her. What are you doing? Karen rolled his eyes, I should be the one to ask you, why do you just eat it like this without fear of poison? Jun pouted and said disapprovingly, I'm not afraid, and didn't you say you can eat it? This thing smells so good, how could it be poisonous? Karen was a little helpless. After thinking about it, he felt that there was no problem, so he stopped blocking it. Jun took a bite, and an expression of surprise appeared on her face for a moment, followed by an expression of satisfaction. How about it? Karen asked curiously. It's amazing and delicious. Jun raised a smile at the corner of his mouth. You try too. Karen was a little hesitant, but finally opened the package and tasted it. The spicy taste filled his mouth, as if it brought long-lost nostalgia. Why does this kind of thing appear in the barrel? Is this the ability of a fisherman? Karen thought to himself. As expected of a system product, it seems that this ability is not simple. I just don't know if I can catch things from other worlds. Chapter 81. After several days of sailing, Karen followed Garp and finally arrived at the port of Windmill Village. Karen stood on the deck, looking at the villages in the distance, feeling filled with emotion. The symbol of Windmill Village is the windmills scattered in the village. The windmills rotate slowly in the breeze, giving people a peaceful and comfortable feeling. This is Windmill Village. This small village not only gave birth to the marine hero Garp, but also the revolutionary leader Drago, the future One Piece Luffy. Karen took a long breath and finally arrived at this famous village. Is this the Windmill Village? Not bad, how do you feel? Garp asked, picking his nose. Don't pick your nose and talk at the same time. Hey, Karen glanced at Garp and praised, it's a beautiful environment, I like it very much. Ha ha ha, that's right, this is the place where I lived since I was a child. Garp's praise for Karen was very useful. He smiled heartily and said, what do you think, do you want to go back with me to see my grandson? Of course, I'm extremely happy. Karen suppressed her inner excitement. That was Luffy, a Luffy who had not been contaminated by red hair. Haha, then come with me. Then, Garp walked towards the center of the village with Karen and Jun. As soon as they got off the boat, Garp and his party attracted the attention of the villagers. They are very familiar with Garp and love it very much. Garp, who was born in Windmill Village, is definitely a hero here. This world is not peaceful, and the kingdom of Goa is not peaceful either, but this is Garp's hometown, so it will appear to be peaceful here. Of course they knew this very well, so they greeted Garp warmly. Garp also responded enthusiastically. After walking for more than 10 minutes, Karen and his party stopped in front of a tavern. Here it is? Maginot's Tavern? Karen was full of doubts. He looked at Garp and asked, is this right here? Garp nodded and said nonchalantly, yes, because I don't have time to take care of him, I put him in this bar. Oh. Karen nodded slightly, understanding why Luffy always appeared in this tavern when he was a child. As soon as I entered, I saw a girl wearing a yellow headscarf and dark green hair standing at the door greeting the guests. Karen recognized her at a glance as Maginot, the proprietress of this bar. Of course, she is still very immature now, and she should not be the proprietress of this bar yet. Uncle Garp. As soon as Garp opened the door of the bar, Maginot recognized him, and she shouted to Garp in surprise. Haha, Maginot. Garp was also very happy to see Maginot, you come to help at such a young age. Little Maginot is so hard-working. When business is good, my parents are too busy. Maginot smiled shyly, then she turned her eyes to Karen and Jun standing at the door, and asked, Uncle Garp is still taking care of us today. Have you made friends? Garp patted Karen on the shoulder and smiled, let me introduce, this is my nephew, Karen. It's not an introduction, just an introduction, why do you have to use hands and feet? Karen felt the strength on his shoulders and was speechless. He dug into his pocket, found a candy from inside, and handed it to Maginot with a gentle face. Sorry, I came in a hurry and didn't bring any gifts. I only brought candies. He bought these for Yuta and Jun on Sendaya Island. He thought that he might see Luffy and Ace today, so he took a few with him. Maginot reached out to take the candy and said with a smile, thank you, brother Karen, I like it very much. Garp pointed to Jun and introduced, this is Jun, and Karen is. He winked at Maginot, and his meaning was self-evident. I know, it's my sister-in-law. Maginot instantly understood what Garp meant. Jun rolled her eyes at Garp, her cheeks flushed slightly, don't listen to Garp's nonsense, Karen and I are just colleagues, I am older than him. Is that so? Maginot was thoughtful. Okay, Maginot, Garp should be back to see Luffy. At this time, a woman with dark green hair standing at the bar said. It seems that she is Maginot's mother. Garp, welcome back, how long do you plan to stay this time? Garp smiled heartily, haha, it won't be too long this time. Where is Luffy? Still sleeping, Maginot, take Uncle Garp to see Luffy. Okay, Mom. Is this Luffy? Karen looked at the sleeping baby in front of him. His round face and slightly raised corners of his mouth were no different from ordinary babies. Not even as cute as Yuta. Is this the future One Piece? If he is brought to Marine for training now, what will happen in the future? Of course, this thought only lasted a moment, and he stopped. Let's not talk about whether Garp is willing or not, even Karen himself doesn't want to change too much. Of course, some things are beyond his control. What will happen in the future under the tide of the times is unknown. Haha, yes, I will train him to be an excellent Marine later on. Garp looked confident, as if he had seen what Luffy looked like when he grew up. Karen's lips twitched slightly, and she kindly reminded, children are all rebellious. Sometimes the more you want them to be, the more they will hate them. It's best to let him think for himself. Garp blew his beard and glared, with an unkind look on his face, are you doubting my education methods? If you dare to rebel, I don't believe I can train a pirate. Not just a pirate, but also the king of pirates. When you see One Piece's hat on your grandson's head, I'll see how confident you are. Of course, now that you have a strong fist, you have the final say. Karen was speechless looking at Garp. He decided to stop it, since he had already persuaded him. Seeing that Karen no longer refuted, Garp focused his attention on Luffy again, wondering what he was thinking. Returning to the tavern, Karen and Jun ordered a glass of malt wine from the bar and sat at the bar to taste it. Also coming out with them was Maginot. She was greeting the guests again in the tavern. Karen made a rough calculation and found that she should only be 12 years old now, but she was already very proficient in everything in the store. Apparently he comes here often to help. Karen and Jun chatted without saying a word for about half an hour, and Garp walked in with a smile on his face. He also ordered a glass of ale and sat next to the two of them. Will Drago come back to see Luffy? Karen suddenly asked about this very sensitive topic. Garp was startled, then showed a helpless smile and scolded, that brat, who knows, maybe, maybe not, he also has his own things to do. Do you think he did the right thing? Chapter 82. Garp was silent for a while, then poured a glass of wine into his mouth and said with unclear meaning, whether what he did is right or not doesn't matter to me, it's what he thinks is right. Then, he stared at Karen with sharp eyes and asked, what do you think? Karen was also silent. Warring States had asked him about this. He was saved by Dalag. It was also because of Dalag's letter of introduction that he was able to come to the Marine headquarters without any hindrance. He was grateful to Dalag. I think he did the right thing. Then he paused and added, for now. Jun seemed to be drunk and didn't seem to hear anything. She didn't say a word and didn't even look at the two of them. There was another period of silence, and suddenly the door of the bar was violently kicked open. A group of people dressed like wandering warriors appeared at the door of the tavern. The leader had a gloomy look on his face. As soon as he entered the door, he looked around and then focused on Jun, who was sitting at the bar drinking. Hello, guest. Maginot hesitated for a moment, then she gritted her teeth and walked up to one of the leading Ronin and timidly said hello. The leader of the Ronin glanced at Maginot and said in a gloomy tone. Laozi is the bandit Sage who just arrived here. Remember this name for me. I will come here often in the future. Also, prepare 10 barrels of malt wine for me. Maginot was startled by Sig's fierce gaze, but she had not forgotten her responsibilities. Mom, prepare 10 barrels of malt wine. Okay. Maginot's mother didn't panic at all, after all, Garp was drinking here. Sig nodded with satisfaction, and then slowly walked towards the bar. Karen stared at Sig carefully sizing up this man who was holding a wine bottle and swiping 4 emperors and stepping on the future of One Piece. He is not that old now and does not have that X-shaped scar. Karen did not recognize him for a while. It was not until he called out his name that Karen felt familiar. He'd better not mess with me, I'm not as good-tempered as the red-haired Shanks. Karen stared at Sig with interest, as if he was looking at a clown. Sig felt uncomfortable being stared at by Karen, and he roared with a gloomy face. What are you looking at? Karen was a little funny, he was not interested in making jokes with Sig, and then he turned his eyes back to the wine glass in front of him. It was Karen's evasive look that made Sig feel that he was good again. He was very satisfied with Karen's reaction. So, he said desperately, you are a Marine, Laozi is a bandit. A Marine like you who only catches trash pirates, Laozi hasn't taken it seriously yet. Seeing Karen didn't respond, he laughed wildly and said, "Only one piece Roger will I give him some face. Laozi is the man who wants to become the bandit king." Karen raised his forehead slightly and glanced at Garp, suspecting that Luffy was influenced by this guy. Then he raised his head and drank all the wine in the wine glass. With a slight exertion of his right hand, the wine glass in his hand immediately turned into a ball of waste. Then he stood up, and his height of 2.5 meters instantly overwhelmed Sigurd. Karen took out the Zhangfeng in his hand and said slowly, "What kind of king do you want to be?" Karen was secretly happy, and he also experienced the fun of Kaido. Zhangfeng has just been unsheathed, and the cold light is shining like stars in the ice and snow, revealing a suffocating coldness. When Sig saw this, the smile on his face instantly froze, and a trace of fear flashed in his eyes. He raised his head and stammered, I didn't say anything, just kidding." "Really?" Karen slowly put away his hidden edge and sat down again. Jun glanced at Karen in surprise, but he didn't expect Karen to let him go. Sig didn't dare to trouble Jun now. He stood a little further away from Karen, waiting for the landlady to prepare malt wine for him. After a while, the landlady walked out of the back door pushing a cart. "Guest, this is the wine you want." Sig took the cart gloomily, turned around, and prepared to leave. "You haven't given me the money yet." Maginot couldn't help but remind him aloud. Sig glanced at Karen, then took out a few Baileys from his arms and threw them on the bar. Maginot picked it up, checked it, and said awkwardly, "These are not enough." Sig's face was ugly. He raised his voice and said gloomily, "Little sister, Laozi is a bandit. Have you ever seen a bandit drink and pay for it?" Then, he ignored Maginot's reaction and pushed the trolley to leave. Seeing this, Maginot grabbed Sig's clothes and refused to let him leave. Sig flicked his hand and tried to throw the annoying brat to the ground. The next moment, Karen held Sig's wrist tightly, and he said coldly, "It's natural to pay for drinking. I don't think you will default on your bill." Sig was startled and shouted angrily, "Marine kid, I gave you face just now, but now you don't give me face, I want to make you look good." As he spoke, he whipped out the long knife from his waist and struck Karen's arm hard. Karen did not dodge, and the black breath flashed past her arm. With a clang, the long knife in Sig's hand was bounced to the ground. He looked incredulous, "What kind of monster are you?" Karen smiled slightly, "Monster." As he spoke, he exerted slight force on his right hand, causing Sig to scream in pain. "Ah! Will you pay?" Karen looked at him calmly. "Pay, I'll pay, please let go." Sig quickly begged for mercy, then tremblingly took out a few stacks of Baileys from his pocket and threw them to the ground. When Karen saw this, the strength on his hand became a little stronger, and he smiled. "Pick it up and give it to her." "Ah! Okay, okay." Sig slowly bent down, and then he slipped a small dagger from his sleeve, with a fierce flash in his eyes, and stabbed Karen's abdomen hard. The dagger fell on Karen's abdomen as if it was pierced into steel, unable to advance at all. Karen stretched out 2 fingers and clamped Sig's dagger. Then, he held the dagger in his hand, the smile on his face not diminishing. "You really don't have a long memory." As he spoke, Karen used the dagger to mark Sig's neck, and his voice suddenly turned cold. "The dagger is good, but it would be better if it saw blood." Sig felt the friction on his neck and spoke with difficulty, "I'm sorry, I was wrong, don't kill me. I'll pick up the money right now." Karen put the dagger on Sig's forehead, sliding it slowly like an artist painting, regardless of Sig's screams. Ah! Karen let go of Sig's hand and nodded with satisfaction. "It's much more pleasing to the eye." Sig covered his forehead, ignored the pain in his body, picked up the money on the ground, and handed it to Maginot respectfully with both hands. "Karen was like a ghost," he said in a solemn tone. "By the way, my name is Karen, welcome to revenge. Don't dare, don't dare. Take away." "Yes, Colonel." Chapter 83. You don't want to let. Soon, night fell. Except for a small number of Marines stationed on the warship, the other Marines stayed in the hotel in Windmill Village. Karen is no exception. The hotel he stayed in was above the tavern, or the tavern itself was the hotel. In the Windmill Village at night, with the gentle breeze, Karen could hear the sound of the windmill rotating slightly. Although the sound was not loud, it seemed particularly clear in the quiet night. Karen stood on the windowsill, the breeze gently brushed his face, bringing a faint floral fragrance. After wandering on the sea for a long time, there is always an unreal feeling when your feet land on land. Without the feeling of swinging in the sea, Karen found it difficult to adapt for a while. He raised his head and looked at the clock hanging on the wall. It was now past 8 p.m. There was still some time before bed, and out of boredom, Karen decided to go to the beach to continue her fishing plan. During these days of fishing at sea, in addition to spicy strips, he also gained nothing, but also Coke, potato chips, vegetables, fruits, cigarettes. There are just no fish. Thinking of this, Karen's mouth twitched slightly, and he finally understood the true meaning of the fisherman. A fisherman will never be in the Air Force. A fisherman can catch anything except fish. Karen carried the fishing rod and walked on the path paved with stones. The moonlight shone on the ground, revealing a gentle silver glow. The surrounding houses are quiet and peaceful. Occasionally, a few night birds fly from the treetops and fly across the night sky, leaving a faint chirping sound. Suddenly, a familiar figure appeared in Karen's sight. His back was tall and majestic, holding a fruit basket in his hand. He looked a little lonely in the dim light. "Lieutenant General Garp." Karen called to him softly. Garp's movements froze, he turned his head, met Karen's gaze, and scratched the back of his head awkwardly. "It's Karen, why don't you go to bed so late? Aren't you asleep too?" Karen stared at the fruit plate in Garp's hand, thoughtfully. It seems that Garp is going to see Ace. The difference from the past is that this time he is not the only one who returns to Windmill Village. Karen and Jun are also coming with him. Although he wasn't worried that Karen and Jun would recognize Ace's identity, it made sense for him to visit Ace at night just to be on the safe side. "Ha ha ha, I'm old now. Please come out and take a look at the night view. Do you still need a fruit basket to see the night view?" Karen pointed to the fruit basket in his hand and couldn't help but joked. "This is one of my great hobbies." Garp casually took a piece of fruit from the fruit basket to his mouth and took a bite, smiling nonchalantly. "After dinner, I just took a walk while eating the fruit." Then, with a serious look on his face, "It's you, brat, why are you out here so late at night?" "Fishing." Karen raised the fishing rod in his hand. "Oh, you go ahead and fish, I'll take a look around by myself." With that said, Garp turned around and left, not wanting to get entangled with Karen. How could Karen let go of this good opportunity? He quickly chased after him. "Lieutenant General, this is your hometown. Why don't you take me around?" Garp didn't seem to hear him and continued walking forward. He didn't stop until Karen patted his shoulder. "Hey, why haven't you left yet?" Karen cursed in his heart. "Old bastard, I don't believe you didn't hear it." He kept his expression calm and repeated, "I forgot how to get to the beach, why don't you take me there?" "Go away," Garp scolded him directly, "don't you have any legs? Go shopping by yourself." Karen wasn't angry either. He muttered in a low voice, either to Garp or to himself. "I heard in the tavern that there is a group of bandits in the mountains nearby, and their leader is called Dodden. Who did you listen to?" Before Karen could finish her words, she was interrupted by Garp. He looked at Karen with an unkind expression. Being stared at by Garp like this made Karen feel a lot of pressure. Then he stopped talking and said directly, "I know who's where." Garp's face was gloomy, and then he heard Karen say, "There is only one truth. The illegitimate son of Dalag is entrusted there, right?" Karen's eyes flashed with wisdom and her tone was full of affirmation. Garp breathed a sigh of relief after hearing this, and looked at Karen with suspicious eyes. Then, he shook his head and admitted carelessly, "Good boy, you have discovered all this." "Yes, Darag's child is indeed fostered there. Like Luffy, he is also my grandson." "Haha, I didn't expect that you, Garp, with your thick eyebrows and big eyes, can also deceive people. If I hadn't seen the animation, I would have been deceived by you." Karen secretly complained in his heart, and said with great excitement, "Haha, it's true. I do have the potential to be a detective." Then, Karen put her arms around Garp's neck, carefully looked around, lowered her voice, and said in a deep voice, "Now that you have been discovered, take me to see me. I am also very curious about Brother Darag's other child. What does it look like? We are our own people, you won't distrust me, right?" Garp looked at the arm on his shoulder and said casually, "What would happen if I didn't take you with me?" Karen intentionally teased Garp, but why did this old guy strike so harshly? His tone was threatening, and he said pitifully. Lieutenant General, you don't want anything to happen to Brother Durag's child. Garp's face darkened, and he was about to curse when he heard Karen say with a smile. Ha ha ha, I'm just kidding. Of course I wouldn't do that. That's Brother Durag's child. How could I hurt him? But as you said, I have legs myself. I looked for them slowly, but I don't believe I can't find them. In the end, Garp compromised. After all, as a marine hero, he couldn't silence Karen. So the two began to walk side by side towards Mount Kalpo, where Dodden's gang gathered and where One Piece's son Ace lived. The two were walking when they suddenly heard a roar in the distant forest. An eye-catching white-fronted tiger slowly walked out of the mountain forest, majestic, and its muscles shone in the moonlight. Karen took a closer look and saw that this was not the first mini-boss the three brothers would face in the future. The eye-catching white-fronted tiger saw the two walking faster and faster, and finally started to gallop away. Karen's eyes flashed. He didn't mind being a tiger killing Wu Song once. Chapter 84. Karen Susu. But to his surprise, the tiger ran in front of the two men and did not attack them. Instead, it crawled on the ground like a dog and looked at Garp. This is... Karen was confused. Ha ha ha, don't worry, this tiger is the descendant of my childhood playmate. Garp was very happy to see the tiger. As expected of Garp, even his childhood playmates are so different. Karen gave a thumbs up and praised, as expected of you. After sending away the tiger, there were no other incidents between Karen and Garp. After walking for about half an hour, the two finally arrived at their destination. In a place surrounded by trees on Mount Kalpo, several scattered small houses appeared in front of Karen's eyes. The bandits hadn't rested yet, and they were discovered as soon as the two of them approached. Who is Garp? The bandits screamed in surprise. After a while, a strong woman with orange hair and golden earrings walked out of the house. She was very distinctive. Karen recognized her at a glance. She was the leader of this group of bandits, Kali Dodden. She is also the adoptive mother of Ace, Sabo, and Luffy. A bandit who looks fierce and has bad words and deeds, but is kind-hearted and values love and justice. Karen didn't know much about her, but Garp seemed to trust her very much, even telling her Ace's life experience. As soon as she walked out, she smiled flatteringly at Garp and said, "It turns out to be Mr. Garp. Are you here to take away this annoying brat?" Ha ha ha, how is that possible? I'm very relieved of you. Garp smiled heartily, don't worry, I just came to see Durag's son. Dodden was stunned for a moment, and then saw Karen next to Garp. Her expression changed, then returned to normal, and said with a smile, haha, it turns out that it is like this. Durag's children are living a good life here, but when will you take him away? Karen looked at the two people who were acting crazy in amusement. He pretended to be very puzzled and asked, why did you give Brother Drago's child to the bandits to raise? Why not foster it in a tavern like Luffy? Garp laughed, don't you understand this? Different people have different personalities. Ace is suitable for Dodden to raise. She is very good at raising children, right? The last words were said to Dodden. Dodden squeezed out a smile, ah? No. That's right. Okay, let's not talk so much. Take me to see Ace. With that said, Garp handed the fruit basket in his hand to Dodden and walked quickly into the house. Karen followed closely behind. As soon as he walked in, Karen found Ace lying on the bed. He was no different from other babies. The only identifiable bird, Madara, had not yet grown. It is now the year 1503 of the Hiwan calendar, which means Ace is already 3 years old. Ace wasn't sleeping yet, he was practicing walking and running on the ground. Seeing that Garp and Karen were not afraid of strangers, they just smiled at them. Haha, little Ace is already so big. Not bad, not bad. He even learned to run. Garp looked delighted. He bent down, held Ace in his arms, and showed off to Karen. You see, I told you that Dodden is very good at taking care of children. Karen stretched out her finger and tapped Ace on the face. He nodded and replied with a smile. Indeed, he is very energetic. He is worthy of being a descendant of Brother Dulag. His eldest brother got used to it more and more. Garp laughed and teased Ace. Call Grandpa quickly. Ace is very smart, and he is also very close to Garp. A childish voice comes out of his mouth, Grandpa. The smile on Garp's face was undisguised. He laughed loudly, pointed at Karen, and said with a smile. This is your Uncle Cullen. Karen Susu. Ace didn't seem to have a very accurate pronunciation of his uncle. Being called uncle by Ace, Karen said that she was under a lot of pressure. Ace was not an ordinary person. Thinking that Ace would become a member of the Whitebeard Pirates in the future, Karen couldn't help but feel very happy. Thinking of how Ace would call Whitebeard daddy and uncle when he fought against Whitebeard in the future, Karen felt very comfortable. Now, any member of the Whitebeard Pirates would be one generation below him. Karen quickly took out a candy from his pocket, handed it to Ace, and said with a smile. So good. Meanwhile on the other side. Marine Headquarters, Marine Land, Fleet Admiral Office. Zifa and Warring States sat on the seats beside them, sitting upright. Opposite them sat a very strong old man with a broad chest, tawny skin, and white hair and beard shaped like a mountain. He is Marine Fleet Admiral Cyborg Sora. He held the phone bug in one hand and looked at the other end with a very serious expression. Karen is the most promising Marine in our Marine Elite Training Camp. His future achievements can at least become a general. On the other end of the phone were the top leaders of the world government, the 5 strongest people among the celestial dragons, the 5 elders. Sora, you have to understand that whether he can become a general depends on more than just his potential. He is just a kid, and he is a kid who provokes the world government. We have given you a lot of face without punishing him. You actually asked him to see Vegapunk and even asked for the Phantom Beast Devil Fruit for him. Did you know that even the few of us don't have much inventory? Don't think that you can be so willful just because you become the commander-in-chief of the world government. You must know that these rights are given to you by us. Without us and without the Tianlong people, you are nothing. The 5 of them spoke coldly to each other. Cyborg Kong rubbed his temples and said calmly, it just so happens that I also feel that my ability is too poor. Under my leadership, the so-called era of great pirates has emerged. How about I resign today? Apparently he has his own set of procedures for dealing with 5 elders. Moreover, he didn't believe a word of what they said to save Marine's face and not deal with Karen. It's just that they haven't found any evidence yet. Maybe CP agents have been sent to investigate Karen now. Ahem, Kong, I know you are in a hurry, but don't be anxious yet. We are very aware of your contribution to the organization and will not deny your merits just because of an accident. And the reason for all this is. The 5 elders didn't say anything, because they were the ones who gave all these instructions. They wanted to scare the monkeys, but they didn't expect it to be self-defeating. But no matter what, he is too young. We can let him get in touch with Vegapunk, but don't think about the Phantom Beast. Gang Gukong looked at Senguo, who looked as normal as if he had expected all this. Then, he looked at Zifa and found that Zifa was looking at him eagerly. He sighed slightly. He couldn't ignore Zifa's gaze. He felt guilty for the person who gave everything to Marine. So, he coughed lightly and said solemnly. Karen is Zifa's most satisfied disciple, and he is also Garp's family. Chapter 85. 5 Elders' Choice. Zifa's disciple, Garp's family. Even the 5 elders felt the pressure from the weight of these 2 sentences. Although they are the most powerful people in the world, it does not mean that they will not consider the thoughts of their subordinates. 80% of Marine generals were taught by Zifa. His disciples are all over Marine. He himself is one of the few existing Marine generals. Whether in terms of combat ability or in nurturing Marine, Zifa is an indispensable core figure of Marine. If he loses his temper, it will never be a good thing for world government. And Garp is a Marine hero. His influence in Marine is no worse than that of Zifa. Moreover, more importantly, in the Battle of the Valley of the Gods, whether he did it intentionally or unintentionally, Garp saved many celestial dragons, which made him its position in world government has become delicate. This is why Garp's son Durag founded the Revolutionary Army, and why the world government tolerates Garp so much. Against this background, when the 5 elders deal with the relationship with these 2 figures, they must not only consider their personal abilities and influence, but also the larger group and potential turmoil they represent behind them. Moreover, these 2 people are not very good-tempered. Any dissatisfaction or violent reaction against them may cause turmoil within Marine and even affect the stability of world government's rule. After a long silence, one of the 5 elders, Saint Topman Wachulai, who was wearing a dark green suit, had a bald head, a splayed beard, and a Madara birthmark on his forehead, slowly spoke. We will consider this matter. Zifa, who was sitting aside, couldn't bear it any longer. He shouted, consider? How long have you been considering this? His voice was not concealed at all, so the 5 people on the opposite side heard it very clearly. Their expressions were a little ugly, and Topman Wachulai snorted coldly, I remember he is in the East Blue Sea with Garp now. Cyborg Kong winked at Zifa and signaled Zifa to shut up. Then, he smiled and said, yes, after all, he is Garp's family, and his home is also in the East Blue Sea. The cold voice of Saint Topman Wachulai came from the phone bug, in that case, I can let him see Vegapunk, or I can give him a phantom beast species. There was no expression of joy on Cyborg Kong's face. He knew that Topman Wachulai Sheng had not finished speaking yet. Sure enough, Topman Wachulai continued, but we have conditions. What conditions? Gang Gukong said solemnly. Didn't you say that he has the potential to become a general? I want him to stay in the East Blue Sea for 2 years to clean up those annoying pirates in the East Blue Sea. The East Blue Sea is actually not the most chaotic in the world, but who knows that not only One Piece Roger was born here, but also Durag, who founded the Revolutionary Army, was born in the East Blue Sea. As the most chaotic team in the world, North Blue has added a lot of new blood to Marine, such as he, Sakazuki, and Borsalino. This makes the 5 elders think that the East Blue Sea is the source of evil that caused the Age of Pirates. What? 2 years? Zifa's voice sounded particularly harsh in the quiet conference room. His surprise and anger surged into his heart, and he could not restrain himself. You actually let him stay in the East Blue Sea for 2 years. Do you know that you are delaying him? Saint Topman Wachulai's voice remained indifferent, as if he was not affected by Zifa's emotions. This is our condition, Zifa. And I don't think we are delaying him. I know you want him to go to the New World for training, but do you think he can run rampant in the New World after only training in the general training camp for a few months? He is different, he is really. Zifa spoke softer and softer. He suddenly felt that the current Karen seemed really unsuitable to go to the New World. Karen's talent was indeed the best he had ever seen. He has always believed that as long as Karen did not die young, his final achievements would definitely be no worse than Sakazuki and Borsalino. But as Topman Wachulai said, Karen was just an ordinary person a few months ago, no matter how talented he is and how fast his strength grows. He has experienced too few things. Some things cannot be settled with strength, and experience is equally important. Karen didn't stay in the training camp until graduation, so it might be a good thing to let him stay on his own in Donghai for 2 years. Although it was selfish to think this way, he didn't want Marine to lose a good prospect. But 2 years is still too long. Thinking of this, Zifa straightened his tone and continued, no, 2 years is too long, 1 year at most. Saint Topman Wachulai ignored Zifa's thoughts, and his tone was unquestionable, Zifa, he will not lose money if he changes to a fantasy beast species every 2 years. This kind of opportunity is not available to everyone. But he is still young. Zifa angrily said, he should not waste 2 years in the relatively calm waters of the East Blue Sea. Such a comfortable life is likely to make a young man lose his fighting spirit and become lazy and degenerate. And finally sank. Comfort does not mean stagnation. Topman Wachulai Sheng's voice is still calm, if he is really addicted to this comfortable life, it means that he is nothing more than that. Isn't he your most promising student? You have to believe in your students. And as you said, he's still young, which is his advantage, which means he still has plenty of time. Zifa was speechless and remained silent for a full minute. The voice of Saint Topman Wachulai sounded again, with a trace of unquestionable authority. This is our decision. If he cannot accept this task, then he will not be qualified to contact Vegapunk, let alone get the Phantom Beast breed. The atmosphere in the conference room became tense, as if time had frozen. Cyborg Kong coughed lightly, I remember that Karen is now the colonel of the headquarters. In 2 years, I think Karen will be eligible to be promoted to Major General. Once he becomes a Major General, he will be eligible to become the base commander of Marine Fortress in the New World. That is Marine's own business. Except for Fleet Admiral and the Admiral, we will not interfere in Marine's internal affairs. Topman Wuchulai's tone was still cold. Zifa took a deep breath and tried to calm down the dissatisfaction in his heart. He knew that he could not change this decision, but he would not help Karen choose without authorization. I will convey the conditions you mentioned to him. This is the only condition. Topman Wuchulasheng's tone showed no sign of compromise. I understand. Zifa lowered his head, not knowing what he was thinking. Chapter 86. Dodden's music. Ha ha ha, Ace runs so fast. Garp applauded as he watched Ace's running pace. Karen looked at this scene speechlessly. Is this the way Garp raised his children? He just let Ace run around without any care and was not afraid of Ace falling. However, thinking that this is the world of One Piece after all, Karen gradually adapted to it. Come on, come to Grandpa. Garp sat on the carpet on the ground, opened his arms, and motioned for Ace to run into his arms. Ace is still young and has not yet reached the rebellious stage that makes Garp think. So the atmosphere is still very warm, and even Karen is infected by the affection between Ace and Garp. Alas, how sweet it is now, waiting until the future. Karen sighed and had a headache. Ha ha ha. The laughter of the grandfather and grandson echoed in the empty room. Garp pinched Ace's face, and then said to Karen, I remember Yuta can't walk yet. Karen nodded, then shook his head, yes, but I'm not that skilled yet. Garp suggested, why don't you just keep Yuta here? Look how energetic Ace is. After hearing this, Dodden, who was sitting upright, showed a sad and angry expression. No, I feel very tired just taking care of him. Please spare me, Mr. Garp. Garp glanced at Dodden, who immediately put away her sad and angry expression and forced a smile on her face. Karen thought about the future and Yuta shouted at the beach, I want to be the woman of One Piece. He shivered. The picture was so beautiful that he didn't dare to think about it anymore. Karen's face was a little stiff, and he rejected Garp's proposal. It's better to say goodbye. Yuta likes to cry at night. She can't sleep without singing. Garp looked at Dodden, do you usually sing? No. Dodden said cautiously. That's it. Garp was a little disappointed and asked without giving up, can you sing? No. Dodden wanted to say no, but looking at Garp's expectant eyes, she somehow changed her mind, yes. I learned a song when I was young. A flash of light flashed in Garp's eyes, and he laughed heartily, ha ha ha, that's great. Ace happens to be a little sleepy too, so just sing him a lullaby. Ah. Dodden's movements were a little awkward, and his cheeks turned red, I just learned it when I was young, and I haven't sung it for several years. What? The eldest sister wants to sing. The Dodden brothers, who were also sitting upright, could not sit still at this time. They stood up quickly, turned around and ran towards the door. As soon as I ran halfway, I was stopped by Dodden's gloomy voice, where are you going? Ah, I suddenly remembered that there was no patrol tonight. The pig in the sheepfold has escaped, I'm going to catch it. Dodden smiled coldly at his little brother, there is no need to patrol tonight. Also, the pigs in the sheepfold just ran away. We will catch them tomorrow. What's going on with the pigs in the sheepfold? Karen looked at the Dodden boys who were talking nonsense speechlessly. Seeing their reaction, Karen felt something was wrong in her heart. So, he stood up and smiled apologetically. Sorry, it's getting late. I'm going back to rest. Ah? Mr. Cullen wants to leave, but he hasn't performed yet. Dodden turned around with a twisted expression. At this time, Garp also stopped him, yes, let's leave after listening to Dodden's song. Don't you know the way? Just in time, we can go back together. Don't you see that something is wrong? Why are you still looking so excited? Karen doesn't know whether Garp is pretending or serious. Anyway, he doesn't plan to stay any longer. I have a very good memory. I followed you just now and I have already memorized the route. Oh, why are you in such a hurry? Leave after listening. Garp ordered. Karen looked at Garp helplessly. He had no choice but to let someone else have a higher position than him. He had no choice but to sit down, but he was ready to use his life to control his ears to block outside sounds. Seeing Karen and his little brother doing it again, Dodden had an excited smile on his face and seemed confident about the upcoming performance. Next, I will sing a bandit song for everyone. Then, she cleared her throat and slowly closed her eyes. Close your eyes, baby, and fall asleep. The bandit's song, sung in a low voice. The night is gentle and the stars are bright. Protect you until dawn. Beside the campfire, shadow dance. Brotherly love is deep, hearts are as old as before. Although the mountain road is dangerous and long, I'm here to accompany you in your luggage. Her voice was high and harsh, sometimes out of tune and sometimes too long, like a sharp bagpipe in the wind. Every note seemed to be struggling to be squeezed out of her throat, which was simply unbearable. Karen thought that Dodden's singing voice would not be very good, but he did not expect it to be so unpleasant. At this moment, he missed Delika's singing very much, and felt that it was necessary to listen to Delika's lullaby for Yuta after he went back, and wash his ears properly. He finally understood what it means: some people sing for money, and some sing for life. As early as Dodden finished singing the first verse, Karen had already used Life Return to isolate the sounds from outside. Then, he cast his gaze on Garp and smiled silently. Because he found that Garp was swaying from side to side following Dodden's rhythm. Sometimes he could see his mouth opening and closing, as if he was singing this bandit song with Dodden. No, brother, you are marine. Karen really admires Garp's big heart. His eyes flickered and he noticed that Ace seemed to be singing along too. This caused him to wonder whether it was his problem or Dodden's problem. This is sometimes the case: when everyone around you is abnormal, you will wonder if you are abnormal. Then, he put his eyes on Dodden's little brother, and then he felt relieved. This is a normal reaction. Dodden's younger brothers were all restless, covering their ears with painful expressions, trying to block out the harsh melody. After 5 minutes, with the last note falling, Dodden finally came back to his own music world. She bowed proudly, like a real musician, staring at everyone expectantly. Ba bang bang! Garp was the first to applaud, followed by Dodden's younger brothers. Amidst the sparse applause, Garp exclaimed, "Ha ha ha, I didn't expect you, Dodden, to be so good at singing." Then, he turned to Karen and asked, "What do you think?" Karen came back from his contemplation, as if he had just fallen silent into the world of music. With a look of enjoyment on his face, he gave Dodden a thumbs up. "It's so shocking. This is real music." Chapter 87. Heartbeat. The next day, early morning, at the Maginot family hotel. Karen sat up from the bed with a headache, still feeling a little palpitated as she recalled her experience with the Dodden family. Now he had reasonable suspicion that Luffy's singing was influenced by Dodden. Karen came to the bathroom, cleaned up briefly, and then put on clean clothes. Then he opened the door and prepared to walk around Windmill Village. When he first pushed the gate of opening, the door next to him was also opened. "It's Jun, she's also awake." She gently raised her arms and stretched. As she moved, the lines of her body were elegant and smooth, revealing a mature and confident charm. Her skin glowed naturally in the morning light, exuding a warm and charming atmosphere, like petals moistened by morning dew, fresh and full of vitality. "Good morning." Karen smiled and greeted Jun politely. Jun blinked, looked at Karen suspiciously and said, "Where were you last night?" Go fishing." Karen thought for a while and finally gave an uncertain answer. "Really?" Jun looked at Karen suspiciously, as if he didn't believe what he said. She then asked, "Where's the fish? Forget it, you can't catch it anyway." Hey, although what you said is the truth, do you know that the truth is a sharp knife?" Karen looked embarrassed and felt that he needed to explain to Jun, "Actually, I can also catch fish." "Oh, if you mean dried fish, then it does." Jun rolled his eyes, revealing the hidden meaning in Karen's words. Karen said seriously, "But you are undeniably delicious." "It's okay, I admit it's delicious." Jun stretched again and continued, "I saw you and Garp going out together last night." Karen was a little confused. He walked for a few minutes in Windmill Village before meeting Garp. How did Jun see it? "When you left, you were alone, and when you came back, you were too." Jun saw Karen's doubts. Karen was thoughtful and felt a strange feeling in her heart, as if she was a husband who had left home and was being silently waited for by his wife. But soon, he shook his head vigorously to get rid of these messy thoughts from his mind. "That's right, that's not right. I came back very late last night. Didn't you get some rest?" Jun shook his head and said calmly, "I have been in the sea for a long time and suddenly returned to land. I can't sleep." "I see. Karen nodded slightly. Do you want to go for a walk with me? After all, we won't stay here for long. Good. After a simple breakfast at the hotel, the two of them walked out of the hotel side by side. The sun was shining on the earth, and the morning in Windmill Village seemed particularly peaceful and beautiful. Good morning, Brother Karen. A crisp greeting came from the person who was standing at the door of the tavern. After hearing the sound, Karen smiled and replied, Hello, Maginot, are you here to help your mother take care of the pub again? Maginot smiled and nodded, saying, Yes, I like it here very much, and I also like to help my mother do things. Then, Maginot asked with concern, Have you eaten? We provide breakfast here. If you haven't eaten, you can try it. It tastes very good. Karen nodded and replied with a smile, I have eaten. Breakfast is really delicious. After hearing this, Maginot laughed happily and said, That's good. I'm worried that you won't be used to it. After a few brief greetings with Maginot, the two continued walking towards the center of Windmill Village. The morning air was filled with the scent of earth and flowers. Karen and Jun walked side by side on the path, and the sun cast Madara's mottled light and shadow through the leaves, reflecting on their faces. Karen occasionally glanced sideways at Jun and found a trace of relaxation and joy in her expression. What do you think of Windmill Village? Karen asked casually. Very good, Jun nodded, with a gentle light shining in his eyes. The scenery here is beautiful, and people feel a lot more peaceful. Karen echoed, Yeah, it's completely different from the rough waves on the sea. The two continued to stroll, stopping from time to time to admire the blooming flowers on the roadside. Jun gently touched the petals, with a happy smile on her face. At that moment, she seemed to be in a fairy tale, which looked particularly moving. Karen stared at Jun and couldn't help but ask, Do you like flowers? I don't like it. Flowers are too weak and not suitable for me. When Jun answered, he focused on Jinpira on his waist, the sword is more suitable for me. Karen smiled slightly and tried to lighten the mood, there are many kinds of flowers, maybe there is one, that is not so fragile. Jun stared at Karen and said seriously, the same is true for people. There are various types. Which one do you think I belong to? Karen was stunned, staring blankly at Jun. Under the morning light, her face looked particularly soft, and her skin glowed with a delicate luster in the sunlight, like blooming petals, exuding warmth and natural beauty. His heartbeat began to accelerate, and he felt an unprecedented throbbing. He admitted that his heart was beating. I think. Karen. A rushing sound interrupted Karen's thoughts, and also interrupted this delicate and tense moment. Karen looked up and saw that the person coming was Garp. Why does this old cheater always do this at critical moments? He thought of how it seemed to be like this in his room last time, and he was also interrupted. I'm telling you, I saw you guys just now. Garp came running, holding a phone bug in his hand. What's the matter? Karen's tone was a little cold. Anyone who was disturbed at this critical moment would not sound very good. But Garp is Garp after all. He seemed to have noticed nothing and said slowly. Do you still remember that Zifa and Sengoku said they would find you a phantom beast devil fruit and feed it to the hidden edge in your hand? Karen nodded, remember, are there any results? Garp handed the phone bug in his hand to Karen and said with a smile, well, you can ask them yourself. After taking the call, Karen found that the call had not been hung up, so he slowly spoke. This is Karen. Chapter 88. Choice. Almost as soon as Karen finished speaking, Zifa's voice came from the phone bug, obviously he had been waiting. Karen, we have fought for you about the devil fruit last time, but... After a moment of pause, Zifa let out a long sigh, the world government requires you to stay in the East Blue Sea for 2 years to eliminate the pirates in the East Blue Sea. Actually, we all know that this is not the original intention of the Time government. It is just because they felt uncomfortable when you were in the newspaper last time, so they did this. Of course, you can refuse, but the reward will probably be gone. However, don't worry, I will do my best to find a suitable devil fruit for your weapon. Zifa said a lot in one breath, and Karen listened quietly. After Zifa finished speaking, Karen thought for a moment and said in a deep voice, Can I see Vegapunk? In fact, he doesn't care much about the phantom beast devil fruit. He won't eat it anyway. Although the devil fruit is very powerful and cool, it will bring a huge weakness to the user. That means you can't swim, and your whole body will be weak if you touch the sea tower stone. The technology in this world is so crooked, and if it is not guaranteed, even more perverted seafloor stone weapons will appear in the future, and there will be an additional weakness for no reason. This is something Karen cannot accept now. If he had just come to this world before, he might have chosen to eat it, but now he is unwilling. After all, he has a system. Although some of the abilities given by the system may seem abnormal, their functions are really no worse than those of the phantom beast species, or even stronger. Seeing Vegapunk is more attractive to him than the phantom beast devil fruit. Dr. Vegabank is the world's top scientist and inventor, and is known as the man with the world's largest brain. Bloodline factors, clones, biological modifications, artificial creatures, gigantism, artificial devil fruits, sea stone warships, ability conversion conditions, green blood, pacifists, seraphs. He can even build empty islands, and has the mother fire that can easily destroy an island. Everything you can imagine, there is basically nothing that Vegapunk can't do. Technology is the primary productive force no matter where it is. The genius scientist Vegapunk, who is said to be 500 years ahead of the world's technological level, is undoubtedly a legend in this world. It is no exaggeration to say that the world of One Piece without Vegapunk would be like the West without Jerusalem. If only he could gain his friendship. Karen's eyes burned brightly at the thought. No. Zifa's voice slowly came from the phone bug, they require you to stay in the East Blue Sea for 2 years. This is their only condition. Karen was silent. It was not that he didn't want to secretly see Vegapunk, but considering the importance of Vegapunk, it would be difficult. He didn't even know the specific location of Vegapunk. It seems to be in the bank restricted area, which is the island where Aokiji and Akainu later dueled. He didn't expect the world government's attitude to be so tough. He has no intention of breaking with the world government, nor does he have the qualifications to do so. Faintly, he felt that something was wrong with this matter. It was unreasonable for him to be liquidated just because of a false report. I'm afraid Doflamingo was involved behind this incident. Go back to a few days ago. On the Red Earth continent, there is the Holy Land Marijoa and Pangu City. 5 old men with different expressions were standing or sitting, enjoying afternoon tea with comfortable expressions on their faces. Suddenly one of the old men wearing a dark red suit with a scar on his chest spoke. I heard that there is a marine who is very popular in the sea recently. He is the agricultural warrior god of the 5 elders, Shepherd Ten Pit Saint. The old man wearing a dark blue suit, with long straight white hair and a long beard nodded, well, you are talking about the marine named Karen, I've heard about it too, he seems to be one of the elite trainers of this class. The leader of the battalion has already graduated early before it is time for training. He is the environmental warrior god, Marcus Mazazaint. It seems to be the name, Peter Saint thought for a while and commented, a marine who has potential but lacks fear of power is not a good thing. Saint Maz was nonchalant and said casually, young people are always like this. It doesn't matter. Once he experiences something, he will understand. But someone seems to want him to see it now. Saint Peter smiled happily. Who? Saint Maz glanced at Saint Peter. Saint Peter said calmly, it's the kid from the Dong Quixote family. Didn't they give up their identity as Tianlong people? I still remember that kid holding Huo Minggu's head and wanted to ask us to help him restore his identity, Maz Sheng said in a mocking tone. But, it's not that easy. What does he think the Tianlong people are? He can join if he wants to join, and leave if he wants to leave. Saint Peter said slowly, he also brought 1 billion Baileys, saying that he would give another 1 billion after the matter is completed. It's not much, but it seems to be a lot, Maz Sheng nodded and said nothing more. The bald Saint Vauchelai on the side interjected, I remember that kid from the Dong Quixote family. He was quite successful in North Blue. Can't you even handle him? Peter Saint explained, this marine kid named Karen is Zifa's disciple. He seems to have some relationship with Garp. It's normal that he can't figure it out. So that's the case, then this won't be easy to handle. After all, he is marine and one of ours. After a moment of pause, Saint Wakulai added, however, who made him offend the Tianlong people? Even the former neither can the celestial dragons. Maz Sheng said, is that old guy Kong just for the phantom beast fruit that Karen applied to us for? It's him, Saint Wakulai said with a smile, it's just right, we can use this matter to attack him. What does he want? He wants us to keep Karen in Donghai for 10 years. So simple? Do you want to inhibit his development in this way? It seems that Dong Quixote brat wants to take revenge himself. Saint Vasilii pondered for a while and said slowly, it's been too long. It doesn't matter whether it's money or not. I don't want that kid from the Dong Quixote family to think that we can be easily bribed with money. That would be too embarrassing. Tell that kid at Dong Quixote we're going to hold Karen down for 2 years. As for the money, tell him to double it. Karen held the phone bug in her hand and fell into deep thought. To stay or not to stay, that is the question. Jun looked at Karen and opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but in the end she didn't say anything because she didn't want to interfere with Karen's decision-making. You don't have to rush to conclusions, and you don't have to think that it's hard to find the phantom beast devil fruit. I choose to stay. After hesitating for a moment, Karen decided to stay. Meeting Vegapunk was really important to him. If I could gain Vegapunk's friendship, or even kidnap Vegapunk, then in the future, he is sure to create a force that is not afraid of anyone. Even if it's the world government, even if it's the celestial dragons. And it just happened that he could take advantage of these 2 years to accumulate his own strength. His strength grew too fast, which would lead to him being too blindly confident in his own strength. Just like last time, he actually wanted to challenge the red hair. Fortunately, the opponent was red-haired. If it were someone else and he failed, not only would he die, but also the others who went with him would die. This is the consequence of growing too fast in strength, making him unable to see himself clearly. He would feel scared every time he thought about it. Chapter 89. Attacking Marine. 2 years later. East Blue Sea. The sea was rough. Boom. Bang bang bang. The 2 ships were like giant beasts on the sea, one black and one white, chasing each other. The sound of artillery fire annihilated all tranquility, and the sea surface rolled in the deafening roar, setting off waves of wild waves. The white marine warship was emitting thick smoke, and its cannon fire continued to spit out flames, directly hitting the black pirate hull. Every shelling was accompanied by huge splashes of water and shaking of the hull, as if the entire ocean was trembling for this fierce battle. What a bunch of crazy dogs! We were obviously just passing by. On the deck of the pirate ship, a pirate caught the eye. He was tall and muscular, with several small wine barrels hanging around his waist. It seemed that he could enjoy drinking at any time. He was originally very high-spirited until he came to the East Blue Sea. He is not from the East Blue Sea, but from the North Blue. Not all pirates in this world yearn for the Grand Line. There will always be some pirates wandering around who don't have big dreams. As a qualified pirate, he did not choose to plunder in one sea area, but kept waiting for opportunities in other seas. This is why he has not been caught for so many years. According to his past experience, after being discovered by a marine, he only needs to escape. When he escapes to the waters under the jurisdiction of the local marine, those marines will no longer continue to chase them. Because on the sea, most of the goals of marines are not to eliminate pirates, but to protect innocent merchant ships and fishermen. Their duty is to expel these pirates from safe waters, rather than to engage in endless battles with them. Fight. Marines' salary is not generous, and their family needs money to support their children's school fees and parents' medical expenses. Under the cloak of justice, there is more desire for life and expectations for the future. Not only Marine understands this truth, but also many smart pirates. But he never imagined that this tacit iron law of fighting in the East Blue Sea would actually fail. What's going on with these Marines? Don't they have an area under their own jurisdiction? The pirate with the keg hanging from his waist frowned, his voice filled with confusion and anger. A pirate with a few missing teeth exposed at the corner of his mouth and a leaky voice said with a wry smile, I have long heard that a ruthless man came to the East Blue Sea 2 years ago. It is said that once he is entangled with him, he will fight to death. I didn't expect it to be true. After saying that, he spat hard again, and then wiped the corners of his mouth with his sleeve. Damn it, these Marines are crazy dogs. If this continues, they will take down them sooner or later. The pirate with the keg hanging from his waist was furious, clenching his fists, and seemed ready to rush to the deck to confront the enemy at any time. Is the person you are talking about the Hand of Poseidon? Another pirate interrupted, his voice low and nervous, as if he was recalling those rumors. I heard that behind him is marine hero Garp. The reason why Donghai has become weaker and weaker over the years is because he is constantly eliminating pirates. A shrewd-looking pirate whispered. The hand of Poseidon already covers the sky in the East Blue Sea. I heard that no pirate can escape his capture. I told the captain before I came here that the East Blue Sea is no longer the East Blue Sea it used to be. The pirate with the small wine barrel hanging on his waist smiled ferociously. Humph, listen, this kind of legend is just a trick to scare people. Our pirate names cannot be wiped off casually. Since they are unwilling to let us go, boys, please bring the boat over and let them know that we, Fanatic Derek, are not easy to mess with. If they offend us, they've kicked the bucket. On the other side, on the marine warship. How's the situation? Jesse stood on the deck of the second floor and said solemnly to the lookout soldiers on the side. Ensign, they seem to be preparing for a boarding battle. Yes, Jesse was promoted to his personal guard by Karen as early as a year ago, and his position was changed from seaman first class to ensign. This is Karen's application to the Warring States period, and it is a position recognized by the headquarters. A look of excitement flashed across Jesse's face. He nodded and said with a smile, "Ha ha ha, this is great. Get ready for close combat." Yes. Jesse turned around and took out a strange-looking gun from his arms. It was different from the flintlock guns distributed in this department before, but a bamboo hand pistol. It is more like a hand crossbow than a flintlock gun. Then, he took out a wooden bottle from his coat pocket, quickly opened the wooden bottle, and buckled it on the hand crossbow. This is its magazine. The contents inside are naturally not steel bullets, but green beans, with traces of frying on them. These are all made by Karen. As early as the last time Garp ate the food made by Karen and was infected, Karen started to develop this ability. However, because it is a soy product, it is not as strong as a bullet, so it cannot be used on a flintlock gun. It started with a slingshot, but later Karen thought it was too troublesome, so he asked someone to develop this hand crossbow-style weapon. If he could see Vegapunk in the future, he would definitely ask him to help develop a sniper rifle that could carry green beans. As we all know, except for some specific snipers, other people's guns are basically ineffective against strong people, but it is different if Karen's green beans are replaced. No matter who you are, as long as you eat his food, you must squirm. Jesse quickly walked to the edge of the ship's side and looked at the sea in the distance. The black pirate ship is approaching like a ghost, and the waves on the sea seem to be rejoicing for the upcoming conflict. Jesse could see the pirates busy on the deck, and the laughter and shouts mixed together, creating an unsettling atmosphere. After a while, the two ships met like wild beasts on the sea. The moment the wooden ships collided, a huge impact echoed through the sea, causing the water to stir and stir up waves. Damn it, Marine, if you won't let us go, then you, ugh. As soon as Fanatic Derek boarded the marine warship, he started to curse, but before he could finish the curse, a green bean fell into his mouth. Derek subconsciously groaned and wanted to spit out the green bean, but with a unique and tempting fragrance, his brain and mouth began to lose control, constantly urging him to quickly spit out the green bean. Swallow it. Then his teeth began to open and close, and he slowly swallowed the green beans. Pang! Yeah! This is the taste that really amazed me. The green beans exude a light fragrance, which seems to tell the purity and freshness of nature. Every bite is a delicate soothing to the taste buds, with a crisp taste intertwined with soft sweetness. The pirates who landed with Derek all opened their mouths and looked at each other in confusion, staring at Derek's twisting body at a loss. Is this their boss? Why is he so sexy? Even the hot-bodied girls they saw in Happy Street are not as voluptuous as their boss. The key is that it's very eye-catching. What's going on? Boss, what's going on? But this doubt did not last long, because soon they knew what was going on. Just as they were stunned, green beans were shot into their mouths. At the same time, the sound of shredding clothes and blushing moans could be heard endlessly. Chapter 90. 2 years later in Utah. Shocking. It's so shocking. The sweetness of green beans and the delicate taste perfectly match, and the simple seasoning makes this dish even more outstanding. It is not only a vegetable, but also a pursuit of life, which makes me feel alive. Is this really just green beans? The subtle aroma and texture levels make people want to have endless aftertaste. The simple and extraordinary fried green beans can reach such a delicious state, which makes me have a deep appreciation for this dish. Although this was not the first time Jessie and the others had seen this effect, every time they experienced it, the corners of their mouths still twitched uncontrollably. They all thought about how embarrassed they looked eating these green beans. One of the Marines coughed lightly and commented to a writhing pirate. "This guy is so sexy. Ha ha ha, bring the video phone bugs and show them how sassy they are. Are you a devil? But I like it, ha ha." Jessie looked at the people having fun and smiled helplessly, but he didn't stop him because this pirate ship was so capable of escaping. He knew that they were too tight on catching this ship these days. In this way, decompression is not a bad thing. After a while, when Jessie felt that the time was almost up, he ordered, "Okay, catch them and prepare to return." "Yes, Ensign." Jessie stared at the pirates until he saw them being shackled one by one before turning around and walking towards a room on the second floor. "Dong dong dong! Enter." Jessie pushed the door open and said respectfully to a man wearing a cloak of justice standing in the captain's command room, "Colonel Derek and his gang have been arrested." Karen slowly turned around and nodded imperceptibly. "Well, good." After Jessie left, Karen came to a mirror at the door and looked at herself. 2 years ago, he was still an immature boy, with an innocent smile on his face from time to time. But now, 2 years later, the boy has grown into a restrained young man, with his face becoming more clear-cut, and his eyebrows showing maturity. Steady. There was more depth and thinking in his eyes, as if he had experienced a lot and seen more. Wearing a well-fitting shirt and simple trousers, he looked capable yet elegant, and his movements exuded a calm temperament. Under the sunshine, his face became more and more handsome, and his short golden hair swayed gently in the breeze. Every strand was filled with the golden color of the sun, as if exuding a warm radiance. "It's been 2 years, it's time to go back." The warship sailed slowly to the port of Windmill Village. Karen stood at the bow of the ship with a firm gaze, wearing a neat marine uniform, and the metal on his chest shimmered in the sun. "Look, isn't that Karen? He's finally back." People on the dock shouted excitedly, their faces filled with joy and anticipation. "Yes, Karen is back, and this time he caught another group of pirates." An old man said excitedly, his eyes full of admiration. "What a handsome young man! Not only that, he is also capable. He has become an excellent marine general at a young age. It's a pity that I don't have a daughter, otherwise I would have to let her try it no matter what." Another one person said enviously. "Haha, don't think too much. Karen has a girlfriend. Have you forgotten the female marine officer from 2 years ago?" The two of them were very sweet at the time. A woman reminded with a smile. Everyone nodded in agreement. Yes, Karen even has a daughter, how could she not have a girlfriend? In the past 2 years, besides catching pirates on the sea, Karen would also stop at Windmill Village in his spare time. On the one hand, he was watching Ace and Luffy for Garp, but on the other hand, he had no other place to go. Not only the Windmill Village, but also the nearby Shimatsuki Village, Kokoyashi Village, Orange Town, Rogue Town, all have traces of Karen's passing. As the warship docked, Karen walked down the gangway with steady steps. His figure looked particularly tall and straight in the sun. "Karen!" A clear and childish voice came from the crowd. Karen looked up and saw that she had red and white hair and an innocent look on her face. The moment he saw her, Karen felt how fast time passed. 2 years ago, she could only babble and call her name indistinctly, but now she speaks clearly and can walk and jump. Behind her is the mermaid Delica. When Karen is away, Delica helps take care of Yuta. Sometimes Maginot will also come to visit Yuta. Just as Karen expected, as soon as Yuta could speak, she showed her amazing musical talent. Karen did not hide her life experience from Yuta. She told her life experience when she remembered it. Therefore, Karen did not ask Yuta to call him father. This was because Karen felt that she was still young. He nodded slightly to Delica, then lowered his head, stretched out his hand and rubbed Yuta's head. Yuta has grown up. Karen looked at the girl in front of him and couldn't help but sigh. Did Karen bring me something delicious when she came back this time? Yuta rubbed Karen's hand with her hair, narrowed her eyes slightly, like a cute kitten. She moved closer to Karen, his eyes shone with anticipation. "I've finished the dried fish Yuta from last time." Karen laughed dumbly, took out a lollipop from his jacket pocket, handed it to Yuta, and said with a smile, "How could I forget you, glutton?" These lollipops were also caught by Karen in his spare time. When Yuta saw the lollipop, she had an expression of surprise on her face. She immediately reached out to take it, couldn't wait to tear open the wrapping paper and put the candy into her mouth. She savored the sweet taste, with a satisfied smile on her face. Let's go back first. Karen bent down and held Yuta in his arms lovingly, while Yuta hugged Karen's neck tightly, enjoying this warm moment. Howl. Chapter 91. Goodbye, Brother Karen. As soon as they returned to the tavern, Maginot's voice reached Karen's ears. Girls themselves are relatively precocious. In the past 2 years, Maginot's height has been close to his chest. Compared with her previous childish appearance, she now has a bit more girlish charm. She ran to Karen excitedly with a huge smile on her face. Today is as energetic as ever. Karen smiled slightly and looked at the girl in front of her with warm eyes. Thanks to Brother Karen for guarding the East Blue Sea these years, our life has become better. Maginot was a little shy when Karen stared at her. The girl was Hui Shun's age. When she met a capable marine like Karen, it was inevitable that a little shy, not to mention Karen is very good looking. Karen sighed. During these years in Donghai, he had lived a very comfortable life. This feeling was as silent as the spring rain, paralyzing his body and mind all the time. Sometimes he would think, just this is good, since he has nothing to fight for now. Of course, this thought only lasted for a moment, because he still remembered who he was, and he would not allow himself to live indulgently in his new life. The passion and fighting spirit deep in his heart had never dissipated. It's time to say goodbye. Karen said softly, I came back this time to leave. Maginot's smile froze on her face, but then it climbed back onto her cheeks. That's it, then I wish Brother Karen a happy journey. She had known for a long time that Karen would not stay in the small windmill village. There were more worlds waiting for him in the distant future. Although she had known it for a long time, she did not imagine that this day would come so quickly and so unexpectedly, so she inevitably felt a little disappointed. She whispered. Will you come back? Her tone was pleading and expectant. Haha, silly girl, what are you thinking about? Karen wanted to reach out and touch the girl's hair, but felt that this was too rude, so she just raised her hand slightly, suspended it in the air, and said with a smile. I have long regarded myself as my own home, and I will probably be like Garp. Although I won't be here all the time, I will come back to visit as long as I have time. Just don't think I disturb you. Maginot nodded vigorously, smiling like a flower. No, then it's agreed, I still want to see what little Yuta will look like when he grows up. Yuta blinked. She still didn't understand what saying goodbye meant, and said in a sweet voice, when Yuta grows up in the future, she will definitely be as beautiful as Sister Maginot. Maginot reached out and poked Yuta on the face, and said with a smile, Yuta will definitely look better than me in the future. After speaking, he looked at Karen and both of them smiled. Gorbo Mountain, near where Dodon's family of bandits gather. Karen was carrying a large backpack and leading Yuta, and the figures, one large and one small, were walking in the dangerous Gorbo Mountains. In addition to saying goodbye to Maginot, he was also going to say goodbye to Dodon and the others, and also went to see Ace. Thinking of Ace, he had a headache. The 5-year-old Ace is no longer as well behaved as he was when he was 3 years old. Ace's character is becoming more and more rebellious. His heart is filled with the desire for freedom and the confusion that he was born in the mountains. He had no playmates since he was a child. The only ones he could play with were bandits and small animals in the mountains and forests. Karen. A clear voice stopped Karen and Yuta, who were walking deep into the Gorbo Mountains. Karen looked up and found a little Madara child lying on a branch of a tree looking at him intently. Feeling Karen's gaze, Ace jumped down from the tree, took 3 steps at a time and came to Karen's side, then without saying anything, he stretched out his palm. Karen's mouth twitched slightly. Had she become the king of children? What did you call me? Karen looked serious and stared at Ace seriously. Karen. Ace looked a little uncomfortable, but still raised his head stubbornly. Pang. Karen punched Ace on the head, and his head instantly swelled up into a big bump. Ugh, it hurts. Stick education is not advisable, but it is really easy to use, and it is very enjoyable. Say it again. Karen raised his fist with a threatening look in his eyes. Ace looked at Karen's fist and then compared it with his own. So, he gave in. Uncle Karen. Uncle Karen. Hi, that's about right. Karen nodded with satisfaction, then reached out and pressed his shoulder. Do you remember? Ace curled his lips, pointed at Yuta, and said unconvinced, why doesn't she scream? There are so many reasons why, because I won't let it. Karen said confidently. Yuta tilted his head and looked at Ace, maybe I'm more obedient. Yuta has been living in Windmill Village since she can remember. In addition to playing with other playmates in the village, the most special one is her brother in the mountains. She didn't understand why Ace was so different, just like she didn't understand why Karen always left Windmill Village. Ace rolled his eyes and muttered, what's so good about being obedient? Ahem. Karen coughed slightly and looked at Ace, who was about to move. Ace quickly covered his mouth. He knew that Karen was really beaten. Where's my delicious food? Ace reached out again. Karen rolled her eyes at Ace and said angrily, go back first, and I'll give it to you when I get back. After walking for 10 minutes with Yuta in my arms, I finally arrived at Dodden's family's cottage. Brother Karen, come to see Ace again. Dodden wasn't as scared when she saw Karen as she was when she saw Garp, maybe because of Karen's friendly appearance. Well, look at you two. Karen smiled slightly and took off the backpack he was carrying on his back. Inside was the food he caught in the sea, including various snacks and fruits. Dodden used to be very good at trying to shirk it, but since she tasted these foods, she has become rude. How long do you plan to stay this time? As a bandit, she naturally didn't care about etiquette and directly opened the backpack handed over by Karen. After leaving Karen's backpack, Ace naturally wouldn't let it go. In the blink of an eye, he rummaged through several packages of chicken drumsticks and hid in the corner to eat them with a swish sound. Damn brat! Dodden roared angrily, but she made no move to stop him. Only after Ace found a satisfactory snack, she pretended to take out a big chicken drumstick from it and smashed it at Ace, as if she wanted to use the drumstick to kill Ace. Smashed to death. Damn it! Ace reached out to take the big chicken leg and glared at Dodden. Alas, she obviously cares about Ace. Karen looked at this scene in a funny way. He knew that Dodden cared about Ace, but as a bandit, she couldn't express it. You must know that later, when Ace died, Dodden personally beat the man she respected most in her life. What are you looking at, you brat? Dodden snorted coldly, took out a pack of brightly colored spicy strips from his backpack, opened the package and tasted it without caring about others. Suck, this is the smell. Dodden gave a thumbs up and praised. There are so many snacks, but she only likes spicy strips. The taste fascinates her. I'm ready to leave. Karen looked at Dodden funny and said calmly, 2 years are up, I'm going back to Marine headquarters. Dodden was stunned and put away the spicy sticks in her hand, her eyes filled with tears. Woo, why are you so fast? I can't let you go. I think you are reluctant to part with spicy strips. Karen looked as usual and said with a smile. We'll come back. Dodden wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes and closed the backpack Karen brought. She cleared her throat, her expression twisted, and then she seemed to have made up her mind. In that case, let me sing a farewell song for you. Chapter 92. Set sail. I think you want to sing it yourself. Fortunately, I came to the mountain to bring you food when I was fine. You actually want to retaliate against me. The corner of Karen's mouth twitched slightly, there were faint beads of sweat falling from her forehead, and she refused continuously, no. No. Okay, Yuta likes to listen to music the most. Yuta chuckled, her eyes curved into crescent shapes, revealing immense joy and expectation. No, I swear, you won't like it. Karen is really afraid that Yuta will become psychologically traumatized by music after listening to Dodden's songs, so that he will kill a musical genius. But looking at Yuta's innocent and lovely appearance, Karen couldn't bear to refuse any more, so she could only nod helplessly and agreed to Dodden's request. Just sing a part. Karen added. Dodden cleared his throat and began to perform passionately. The mountain breeze is gentle and the night is cool. Brotherly love is deep and our hearts are connected. Although separation is painful, even if there are many storms ahead, the feelings of bandits will never be forgotten. Compared to last time, her singing voice was still as ugly as ever. The voice is sharp and harsh, the pitch is high and low, and even goes out of tune in some places to make people feel creepy. The rhythm of the music often loses control, as if she is engaged in a silent struggle with the melody. This time, Karen did not use the return of life to seal off his hearing, but listened carefully. Although Dodden's singing was not pleasant, it was a farewell gift from his friend. Karen has been observing Yuda's reaction. At first, Yuda's face was full of shock and confusion, but later, she seemed to hear something from the song, and there were even faint tears in her eyes. No, that's an exaggeration. Is this the empathy ability of musicians? Karen secretly cursed in her heart. Turning back to look at Ace, I found that he didn't seem to hear anything, he was just struggling with the chicken drumstick in his hand. Since it was only a short section, it was over quickly. When the music ended, Karen even saw tears from the corners of Dodden's eyes. This made him feel that Dodden's singing was not as unpleasant as he imagined. Ba bang bang! Karen was the first to applaud, and then Yuda imitated Karen's movements and started to echo. Thank you, I feel your thoughts. He did not comment on how good the song was, but affirmed Dodden's intention. Dodden scratched the back of his head in embarrassment, then looked at Yuda expectantly, hoping for her comment. Yuda opened his little mouth, but it seemed that he couldn't remember a word. 2. Shocking! Karen reminded. Yuda was stunned for a moment, then said with a crisp smile, yes, it's so shocking. Karen let out a long breath. East Blue Sea. Shimatsuki Village. Shimatsuki Dojo. Don't be so nervous. I'm here to say goodbye to you this time. Karen sat cross-legged on the futon in the living room and looked at a man with glasses on the main seat, Shimatsuki Koshiro. Shimatsuki Koshiro, who always smiled, looked at Karen with a helpless expression. My family, who knows, I was sitting peacefully at home, and suddenly a marine came to my door and wanted to have a discussion. I didn't want to, and he threatened me with the Revolutionary Army. Shimatsuki Koshiro poured a cup of tea, pretended to be calm, and said politely. Really? Are you leaving right now? Why don't you stay here for a while? Kuina misses you very much. Speaking of this matter, Shimatsuki Koshiro was also helpless. After his last defeat at the hands of Karen, his most caring little cotton-padded jacket became a little rebellious and looked at him less admiringly than before. Haha, that little girl, okay, just stay a little longer. Karen said with a smile, completely ignoring Shimatsuki Koshiro, whose face was getting more and more ugly. No, didn't you see that I was being polite? Shimatsuki Koshiro's smile froze on his face and he cursed in his heart. Seeing that his face was getting more and more ugly, Karen decided not to tease him anymore, and said seriously, I'm just kidding, I've been in the East Blue Sea for too long, I really should leave this time. Shimatsuki Koshiro breathed a sigh of relief, and the smile reappeared on his face, ha ha ha, then I won't give it away. He just wanted to send this evil star away quickly. Karen. At this moment, a quick voice came from outside the door. The sound was like the chirping of birds in the morning, crisp and sweet. A girl poked her head out of the door. She was 5-year-old Kuina. She had been hiding at the door and eavesdropping for a long time. She couldn't help but speak out when she heard Karen was about to leave. Haha, Kuina. Karen was not surprised by this, he had already sensed Kuina's arrival with his sense of sight. You want to leave Donghai? Yes. Take me away. Shimatsuki Koshiro's mood is like a roller coaster. When he heard Karen's arrival, he felt excited. Then he heard that he was leaving, and then he felt relieved. When he was reluctant to stay, he felt worried again. Then Karen refused and came down again. Just when he finally sent Karen away, his little cotton-padded jacket came out again and wanted to go with Karen. You know, Kuina is only 5 years old. Although he knew that Kuina was not leaving because of the relationship between a man and a woman, he still couldn't help but feel a pain in his heart when he thought that his little cotton-padded jacket was leaving with a man. Nonsense! He angrily scolded Kuina. Do you know where Karen is going? Just go with him. Girls should stay at home honestly. I shouldn't have promised her to learn swordsmanship in the first place. Kuina had never seen such an angry father before, and she was a little at a loss. Karen rolled her eyes at Shimatsuki Koshiro, protected Kuina behind her, and said with a smile, Don't be so angry, she is only so young, she doesn't know this. Shimatsuki Koshiro also realized that he had gone too far. He calmed down his tone and said with a wry smile, I'm sorry, Kuina, I lost my temper. Please forgive me. Kuina didn't say a word, she just looked at the wooden sword in her hand blankly. Karen knew what she was thinking, so she comforted her, you misunderstood your father's meaning. It's not that he doesn't love you. It's quite the opposite. Kuina raised her head, a little confused. Because he clearly knows how difficult it is for a girl to become a great swordsman, so he doesn't want you to work so hard. But it's just because it's difficult that it's more challenging, isn't it? I believe you will become a famous swordsman in the future. As the sea breeze blew, the ship slowly left the port. Karen stood on the bow of the boat, feeling the sea breeze blowing on his face, and a heroic feeling surged in his heart. Yang Fan, set sail. Chapter 93. I'm back. Haiwan calendar year 1505. Marine Headquarters, Marineland. Elite Training School. In the early morning, the training ground was filled with mist. The sun had not yet fully penetrated the clouds, and there was a hint of coolness in the air. The marine recruits stood in a neat line, with serious expressions on their faces, staring intensely at a purple-haired man wearing sunglasses standing directly in front of them. Today is the selection day for this elite training camp. They all looked nervous, looking forward to the next assessment. Everyone, Zifa said, his voice loud and firm, today is the selection day for the elite training camp. I believe you know what this means, but please stay calm and don't be overly nervous. Zifa walked back and forth in the recruit queue and continued, I have seen too many people perform very well in training, but when it comes to the real test of the battle, they are unable to perform at their true level. This is because they are not mentally prepared. Zifa stopped and glanced at each recruit. No matter how good you are in training, once you face the pressure of actual combat, your unstable mentality will affect your performance. Therefore, today is not only a test of your physical fitness, but also a challenge to your mental fitness. Okay, that's it, let's get ready for the assessment. Dominic, standing behind Zifa, held the list in his hand and began to call the recruits one by one to prepare for the test. There is no difference from Karen's last assessment, which is also a test of power value. Vega. Power value, 511, qualified. Zifa stared at these recruits and sighed imperceptibly. With the advent of the Great Pirate Era, more and more young people have chosen to go to sea to become pirates in pursuit of wealth and freedom. This trend is like a violent storm, sweeping across the entire ocean, making countless people yearn for it. However, behind this choice, Marines newcomers face unprecedented challenges and pressure. This also makes it difficult for the current new generation of Marine to have some impressive seed players. But it's not like there are no real monsters. Zifa thought of Karen, a smile appeared on his lips, and he murmured. It's been 2 years, it's time to come back. Meanwhile on the other side, an honest-looking but wretched General Marine held a bouquet of roses in his hand and led a group of Marines to block the way to Jun. Jun sighed helplessly, with a grim look on his face, Jiaji. What do you want to do? Jiaji took out a small mirror from his pocket, winked at himself in the mirror, and casually scratched his hair back with his hands. After making sure that his hairstyle was perfect, he nodded with satisfaction and said Jun showed a confident smile. Jun, my goddess, Cake endured the excitement in his heart, with a deep look on his face, Jun, do you know, you are my key, because only you can open the shackles of my heart. Jun's face became increasingly gloomy. Cake glanced at Jun secretly, and saw that the effect didn't seem to be very good. He cleared his throat and continued, I wanted to write you a poem, but my literary talent does not match your beauty, so I decided to say it directly. I like you. Pang. Jun kicked Cake in the lower abdomen. Cake groaned and clutched his stomach. The confidence on his face instantly disappeared, and his expression became distorted and painful. He staggered back a few steps and fell to the ground. The surrounding Marines couldn't help but snicker, obviously they were already used to this scene. How many times has this happened? A Marine officer who came with Jiakai asked curiously. I don't know, but I think it's at least 50 times. Another Marine officer smiled and shook his head, with a hint of sympathy and helplessness in his eyes, this guy is really a tireless pursuer. Even if he gets kicked every time, he still enjoys it. Maybe, this is that guy's purpose. The Marine officer standing behind the two men swallowed his saliva while looking at Jun's long white legs. This kid, there's something wrong with you. The Marine officers standing next to him moved a step away from him. But, it seems, quite exciting. The marine officers present were thinking inwardly, but they knew that they were not Kaji. They did not have a strong body like Kaji, and they would definitely not be able to withstand Jun's attack. Honestly, I've never seen the Jun goddess do anything intimate with that marine. The first marine officer said this with a hint of emotion in his tone. Others marine looked at him in surprise. He was startled and wondered, what's wrong? Am I right? The other marine first examined the badge on his chest, and then asked in surprise. No, buddy, you were just promoted to lieutenant colonel, right? No, right, I was promoted a year ago. He scratched the back of his head, feeling a little embarrassed. Ha ha ha, no wonder, the marine suddenly realized, actually, Lieutenant General Jun has done it before, but that marine seems to be on a mission abroad and has not been back for several years. Is that so? Who is that marine, who can actually win the favor of the goddess Jun? I remember his name is Karen, and he is also teacher Zifa's direct disciple. Hey, I'm getting more and more curious, what does that guy look like? I have met him once before. He is quite famous in the training ground. He has blonde hair. In terms of appearance, I can only say that he is not bad, a little worse than me. Marine boasted as he spoke, his tone full of confidence. You can't be talking about him. Marine, who asked at the beginning, patted his shoulder, pulling him out of his fantasy, and pointed to a smiling marine in the distance. Their gazes followed his fingers, and everyone saw a smiling young marine. He had blonde hair, a handsome face, and deep eyes. The most eye-catching thing was that he was holding an immature little girl in his arms. The little girl was in Marine's arms, her eyes showing curiosity about the world. From time to time she pointed to the training ground in the distance with her little finger. She seemed to be full of interest in the soldiers' training. Her innocence made the surrounding atmosphere change. Soften up. The reason why he was sure that the young man in front of him was the marine he described was because he saw the originally aloof goddess actually showing a bright smile to that marine. That smile is like a flower in spring, blooming at the moment when everything revives, warm and bright. At this time, Karen seemed to notice their gazes and smiled slightly in their direction as a greeting. Karen carried Yuta and came to Jun. Looking at Jun, which had not changed at all after 2 years, he laughed softly. I'm back. Chapter 94. Yes, we have a child. Oh. Jun's answer was very calm, but the slightly raised corners of her mouth indicated that she was very happy inside. Karen was a little helpless at Jun's reaction. She was always like this, being distant and close to her. Karen, is she the mother? Yuta poked Karen's chest with her finger and asked curiously. She knew that she was rescued from the pirates by Karen, and she also knew that there was another woman who rescued her with Karen. What? Mom. Yuta's voice was not loud, but all the marines present were aware of it, so they all heard it. Not only did they hear Yuta's inquiry, they also seemed to hear their own heartbroken voices. It turned out that their goddess had already had a child. The one who had the biggest reaction was Jiaji. He jumped up from the ground and couldn't care less about the pain in his stomach. What? Cake looked in disbelief. He pointed at Jun and Karen, and then looked at Yuta, who blinked at him with an innocent look on his face. This is your child? Tell me this is not true. Neither Karen nor Jun spoke. Jiaji was desperate, and his stretched out fingers began to tremble. Jun, is this fake? His tone was pleading and lonely. Jun just looked at him coldly. Seeing that Jun ignored him, he focused on Karen, his throat rolled, and his tone was hoarse. Karen, please say something. Karen couldn't bear to see Jiaji like this, so he couldn't help but deny it. No. Yes, we have a child. At this time, Jun suddenly interrupted Karen, extinguishing the last glimmer of hope in Cake's heart. Yuta is my daughter. Jun raised his head slightly, his gaze firm, without any hesitation. Jiaji's face was full of disappointment, as if he had been punched. He lowered his head in a daze, then slowly sat on the ground, crying hoarsely. No. Jun. This is not true. This is a fact. Jun replied calmly, without any fluctuation in his tone. Turning to focus on Yuta, her eyes were doting and her tone was soft. Little Yuta has grown up. Mom is really beautiful, just like Karen said. Yuta said in a sweet voice. Jun's cheeks turned red. He glanced at Karen and said with a smile, is it true? Karen really said that? That's true. Yuden nodded seriously. Karen blushed, why didn't he remember what he said? Haha, Yuta is so good. Jun pinched Yuta's cheek, and the two started chatting without caring about other people's eyes. The surrounding marine officers looked at each other, their inner shocks indescribable. One of the officers walked up to Jiaji and reached out to help him up from the ground. He didn't know how to comfort him, but just patted him on the shoulder. Jiaji leaned on his shoulder and sobbed like a child, with runny noses and tears. The officer who helped him up had a stiff face and wanted to push him away, but he couldn't bear it, so he gathered a group of people and prepared to leave this place of right and wrong. Jun noticed that more and more people were gathering here. She looked at Karen and asked with a straight face. Thank you for knowing how to come back. Let's go. We haven't seen you for so many years. Remember to feed me. Jiaji stumbled, pushed away the marine officer who was supporting him, and ran wildly into the distance, crying while running. At that moment, it seemed that all the grief, anger, and pain turned into steamed bun tears and poured down. Karen looked at Jun speechlessly, why are you so ambiguous? What's wrong? Isn't it okay? Is there something wrong with what I said? Jun curled his lips and responded nonchalantly. This is true. Strictly speaking, Yuta is indeed her and Karen's child, but not her biological child. Feeding her is indeed just feeding her. There is really no lie. Jun pouted and said dissatisfiedly, and it's not your fault. Since I ate the food you cooked, everything else I eat is tasteless. You have to be responsible. Karen held her forehead and couldn't help but laugh, you are still the same as before. Okay, congratulations, Lieutenant General Jun. Is this how you congratulate me? Jun stared at Karen, very dissatisfied. Karen smiled cheerfully, then took out a brick-shaped object from the backpack behind her and handed it to Jun. Now, this is the gift I prepared for you. Jun took it and weighed it in his hands. It was quite heavy. What is this? A brick. Yes, yes. Karen said seriously. Get out. Jun was impatient and unwrapped the black cloth directly here. A square stone appeared in front of her eyes. It was a whetstone with a rough surface. Whetstone. Jun stared at Karen with an unkind expression. Ahem, Karen smiled awkwardly and said seriously, this is not an ordinary whetstone, but a whetstone in the hands of a master forger. Isn't that still a whetstone? Jun narrowed his eyes slightly, his tone full of disdain. This is the heirloom of that blacksmith master. I spent a lot of time trying to get it. Karen argued hard that he obtained this from Shimatsuki Koshiro. It took a lot of effort at the time, which is why he hates himself so much. Ha, it turns out it's a second-hand product. Jun rolled his eyes with contempt. Karen's face turned red when he was told this, and he became angry and said, do you want it or not? Want? Jun answered quickly, and then quickly rewrapped the stone. Snort. After saying so much, he finally stopped it. Karen secretly cursed in her heart. Seeing her putting the gift away, Karen continued, let's see Teacher Zifa first. You haven't gone to see it yet. Jun couldn't believe it. She thought Karen had already seen Zifa, and then she said coyly, so, you came back to see me first? Yes. Karen answered with a guilty conscience. In fact, this trip was originally to see Zifa, but he just happened to pass by. What about your little girlfriend? Jun is a bit tasty. I said, I just have a normal relationship with her. Karen quickly denied it. For Tina, he actually felt quite sorry for her. It was a ridiculous thing he did when he first came to this world. Now thinking about the scene in the cafeteria, he still feels a little physically uncomfortable. Jun said angrily, yo yo yo. I haven't mentioned the name yet, Major General Karen already knows who I'm talking about. This expression reminded Karen of Kizaru. Karen coughed lightly, no matter how stupid he was, he knew he shouldn't mention another girl in front of a girl. Okay, don't talk about this, let's go. Teacher Zifa should be at the training ground. Chapter 95. Call Grandpa. Elite Training Camp. Zifa's office. Teacher, 367 people have passed this year. Dominic looked at Zifa carefully. Compared with the last test, this time he was cut in half. You must know that there were only 500 people who passed the assessment in the past, but this year, he has predicted that fewer and fewer people may pass the assessment in the future. It's not because the exam is difficult, but because many people with potential choose to go to sea and become pirates. With the continuous development of the pirate era, more and more young people are attracted by freedom and adventure, and they have embarked on the road of pirates. 367 people, which is much less than in previous years. Zifa finally spoke, his voice low. However, this does not mean that these new troops have no potential. I believe that they will become the backbone of our marine in the future. Dominic nodded, yes, although the number of students has decreased, the quality of these students cannot be underestimated. Everyone is a leader among recruits. Zifa sighed and said slowly, I hope there will be a few more geniuses like Sakaski and Karen. Speaking of Karen, I remember it's been 2 years since he left the East Blue Sea. Dominic didn't know the terms of the negotiation between Zifa and the 5 elders, and he felt a little emotional when he mentioned Karen. He still remembers the first time he was pulled out by Zifa as a sparring partner to show the 6 moves to the recruits of that year. Everything went smoothly. Until I met Karen, he actually had such a magical devil fruit. After he was defeated, although he said that he would do whatever it takes on the battlefield, deep down in his heart, he actually never felt that he had lost. He was just unlucky and happened to meet a weird devil fruit user. But only after 2 months did he know what a monster was. He was defeated again, also at the hands of Karen, and this was Karen who did not use the devil fruit. This time he was convinced that he lost. From that day on, he decided to be an instructor in the recruitment training camp because his talent was not very good. He was where he is today because of his own hard work and sweat, so he decided to be like Ze in this way. He can teach a few real monsters like Karen. Yeah, 2 years. Dong dong dong. There was a knock on the door. Zifa and Donamika looked outside the door, and a recruit appeared at the door. Instructor. What's up? The recruit was a little nervous. He gritted his teeth and finally said, we, the few students who can still move, would like to invite you to have a meal with us. Dominic looked at Zifa and asked his opinion with his eyes. In fact, this basically happens in every session, but last time Karen went into shock when he passed the second assessment, so he didn't participate. Go ahead, Zifa rubbed his temples, I still have some official business to deal with here. How about I accompany you? Dominic hesitated. Why are you accompanying me? Do you want to smoke my cigar? Zifa twisted his neck and scolded with a smile, go ahead, you are their instructor at the training ground, but in normal times I hope you can work with me. They become friends, which helps you get a good sense of what they need. Yes. Dominic saluted. Then he glanced at a recruit who entered the door, and the two of them walked away together. Oh, this kid is still so serious. Zifa shook his head helplessly. Although he is not a very serious person, sometimes he is like this. His Majesty comes from his status. Marine General, Marine Chief Instructor. Not everyone had the guts to be as casual in front of him as Karen. Dong dong dong. About 3 minutes passed. The door was knocked again. Zifa didn't even raise his head and said casually, come in. Crunch. The door was pushed open, but Zifa still didn't raise his head. He was holding the list that Dominic handed over earlier and was looking at their information carefully. As before, most of these people are elites from various branches and relatives of Marine headquarters. Of course, Zifa will not favor them because of their status and background, but it is the same in every world. Dragons give birth to dragons. As the descendants of Marine headquarters generals, they are naturally more qualified and more capable than others. Have talent. Therefore, they are often more likely to pass the exam than others. Smoking. Karen's voice reached Zifa's ears, but he didn't seem to hear it at all, or it could be said that his mind was only on reviewing the information. No. Zifa said casually, his eyes still staring at the information form in his hand. Crack. The sound of the lighter reached Zifa's ears. He frowned slightly, and then, as if he thought of something, he immediately looked up. He saw a young man in a marine uniform smiling at him in the smoke. Karen, Karen. Zifa threw aside the information form in his hand, stood up suddenly, and looked at the young man in front of him. Ahem, let me tell you, why is it still so difficult to smoke? Karen put out the cigar in his hand. In the past 2 years, because of Yuda's existence, he rarely smoked. The cigar he just lit was on Zifa's table. He didn't like cigars himself. Ha ha ha, you are such a kid. Zifa thought of the first time Karen came to his office and the first time he saw Karen smoking a cigar. His behavior was no different from 2 years ago. Zifa put away the cigars on the table and cursed with a smile, "You brat, you really don't know the good stuff. Do you know how expensive this one is? It's such a waste." Karen also smiled. He walked straight to Zifa, opened his arms and gave him a big hug. "I'm back, teacher. I'm sorry." Zifa's tone was a little low. He fought for Karen's devil fruit for 2 years, but the result was that Karen was abandoned in the East Blue Sea for 2 years. "It's not your fault. I'm very grateful to you, really." Karen let go of Zifa and said seriously, "I have lived a good life in the past 2 years and made great progress." Zifa stared at Karen seriously, his eyes flashing with sharp light, as if he wanted to see his innermost thoughts through his eyes. Then, he suddenly stretched out his fist and lightly punched Karen's chest. At the same time, he raised the corners of his mouth, showing a faint smile, and said, "Really, let me see your level later. I won't let you down." Karen's tone was full of confidence. So, both of them laughed. "Ahem, okay, let me introduce someone to you." Karen suppressed the smile on her lips and said seriously, "You have to be mentally prepared." "What?" Zifa opened his eyes wide. Seeing Karen's serious expression, he had a vague guess in his mind. "Come in." Karen turned around and opened the door handle. 2 figures, one large and one small, appeared in front of Zifa. "She is Yuda? Your adopted daughter?" Zifa was actually not surprised, because he had actually been in contact with Karen for the past 2 years, so he knew that Karen had an adopted daughter. Yes, Karen took Yuda's little hand and brought her to Zifa with a smile on her face. "Call Grandpa." Chapter 96. Pink Fruit. "Grandpa." Yuda said crisply, her voice milky and milky, sounding as cute as a little angel. Her big eyes sparkle with innocence and curiosity, making people want to hug her. "Grandpa?" These 2 words were like a bolt of lightning, splitting open the mud in Zifa's mind. This word was so unfamiliar to him, as if it had been forgotten in a corner by time. Since his wife and son were killed by cruel pirates, he has been trying to numb himself with work over the years. Although he remains calm on the surface, he has always been swallowed up by endless pain and regret in his heart. He often blamed himself and asked himself, if he had not insisted on being a no-kill general, would everything have been different? Will he not lose his beloved family member? At that time, Zifa firmly believed that justice should be achieved through tolerance and redemption, rather than killing. However, it was precisely because of his belief that the heinous pirates continued to do evil, which ultimately led to the tragic death of his wife and children. Now, facing this angel-like little girl in front of him, he fell into a trance. He asked subconsciously, "What? What did you call me?" The voice was trembling and filled with hope. Yuda seemed to be frightened by Zifa's appearance. She turned slightly sideways and hid behind Karen, looking up at Karen. Karen looked at her with encouraging eyes. "Grandpa, Grandpa!" Yuda plucked up the courage and shouted again. "Ha ha ha, good, good, good." Although Yuda's voice was very small this time, it was like a thunder in Zifa's ears. He was dancing excitedly, like a child, and was no longer as serious and deep as before. "I have a family again, and I will no longer be alone." Zifa bent down and wanted to hold Ula in his arms, but when he saw Yuda's expression at this time, he immediately realized that he was acting a little out of character. Ahem, he coughed awkwardly, touched the back of his head, and looked for something on his desk. Karen immediately realized that Zifa was looking for something that children would like. But apart from the cold documents, the only thing left on his desktop was the cigars he used to relax in his spare time. There was nothing that a child would like. "You can't give Yuda a box of cigars, although that thing seems to be very valuable." Karen calmly took out a candy from his coat pocket and wanted to hand it to Zifa. But at this moment, Zifa seemed to have thought of something. His eyes lit up, he turned over Karen, squatted down slowly, rummaged for something inside, and then took out a piece of fruit from a safe. The pedicle of this fruit is in the shape of a green musical note, a round sphere, the whole body is pink, with swirling patterns all over the surface, and the middle part is surrounded by circular lines that look like a staff. "No, this is not an ordinary fruit, but a devil fruit. Zifa grabbed the fruit and came to Yuta. He smiled and said, Grandpa, please eat fruit, okay? Yuta stretched out her hand, seeming to be particularly interested in this fruit, but she still raised her head and looked at Karen first, her eyes full of desire. Karen shook her head slightly at her. Then, she retracted her outstretched hand. Zifa also discovered this. He looked at Yuta with relief. He could see that Yuta wanted this fruit very much, but her upbringing told her not to accept things from strangers. A little girl could resist it. The more he looked at Yuta, the more satisfied he became with this kind of temptation. But he wasn't so satisfied with Karen. What? Why don't you let her take it? Zifa stared at Karen with an unkind expression, his tone full of dissatisfaction. Karen didn't speak, but took the devil fruit from Zifa's hand. He looked at it carefully, and the more he looked at it, the more familiar it became. What kind of devil fruit is this? Is there an illustrated book? He asked while looking at it. Zifa patted his head, bent down, took out a thin document from inside, and slowly opened it. Paramecia, the fruit of song. Zifa handed the document in his hand to Karen. Karen didn't look, because he already had a guess and just needed Zifa's confirmation. Sure enough, it is really the song fruit, which is the devil fruit that Yuta ate in the plot. This is a very powerful devil fruit. Yuta relied on this fruit to become the boss in the movie version. Of course, this is not the point. The point is that although Karen does not know how Yuta ate the song fruit in the plot, he definitely did not eat it in the hands of Zifa. Because she is a pirate and Zifa is a marine, there is no reason for the two of them to interact. The only thing they have in common is that they are both theatrical bosses. But now this devil fruit has indeed appeared here, which makes Karen feel incredible. Is it because of the butterfly effect, or? Karen thought of a later setting, devil fruits will choose their masters. This seems to be the only explanation. How did you get this devil fruit? Karen returned the song fruit to Zifa and asked curiously. Zifa thought for a while and said. A year ago, I led the last batch of students for practical training and captured it from pirates. After a pause, he added, originally, I wanted to leave it to the elite students of this class. It hasn't been allocated yet, so I haven't assigned it yet. However, I saw that Xiao Yuta liked it very much, so I decided to leave it to her to eat. Karen nodded and then asked Yuta, what do you think of that fruit? Yuta stared at the song fruit in Zifa's hand and said crisply, I think it looks good, and it should also be delicious. Her eyes were always looking at the song fruit, and it was obvious that she wanted to eat it very much. Karen felt that she should first explain the pros and cons of devil fruits to Yuta clearly, and then let her make her own decision. He didn't want Yuta to eat it, because he remembered that, strictly speaking, Yuta ended up in the plot because he ate the song fruit. But he will not stop Yuta's own ideas because of his own arbitrary ideas. Listen Yuta, this is not an ordinary fruit, but a devil fruit. After you eat it, you will gain some special abilities, but at the same time you will become unable to swim, which means you will become a landlubber. Karen's expression was serious, he didn't want Yuta to make a decision because of temptation. Will eating it give me special abilities? Just like Karen. Yuta looked at Karen curiously. She was referring to the scene of Karen cooking and Karen's other ability. Yes. Then what ability does this one have? Karen was a little hesitant, but Zifa beside him couldn't bear it anymore. He read to the illustrated book in his hand. It is a fruit about music. Chapter 97. Major General Cullen. Congratulations, Major General Cullen. Warring States adjusted Karen's collar and hung a medal on his chest. Thank you, Warring States Fleet Admiral. Karen puffed up her chest and said with a smile. Ha ha ha, what a boy, even I dare to make fun of you. Warring States shook his head helplessly, not yet. Although he said this, the smile at the corner of his mouth couldn't stop rising. No one hates promotion, except Garp. Of course Garp doesn't hate it either, he just simply doesn't want to serve the celestial dragons. Sengoku is naturally not a Garp, so he doesn't hate hearing people ridicule him as a fleet admiral, because although he has been a general in these years, he is actually fulfilling his duties as a fleet admiral. He is recognized by Marine as the next fleet admiral. And there is no suspense about the next fleet admiral candidate. As long as Cyborg is promoted to commander-in-chief of the world government army, he will become the real Marine Headquarters Fleet Admiral. It's a pity that you came back a little late. Sengoku's tone was a little regretful. Why? Immediately, Karen thought of something and said slowly, have Rosinante and the others already graduated? Warring States sighed, yes, I graduated. Where is he now? Karen stared into Sengoku's eyes. This is a very rude behavior, but considering the consequences of Rosinante's role in the plot, he can't care so much. In New World, I didn't expect that he went to New World before you. Senguo poured a cup of tea and handed it to Karen. His expression did not waver at all, which made it difficult for Karen to judge whether what he said was true or false. Really, Karen said, feeling slightly relieved. He remembered that Rosinante was in North Blue when he was undercover. Yes, it is now the year 1505 of the Hainan calendar, and there are still 4 years before Rosinante's accident. He does not need to worry too much. After he has finished dealing with Vegapunk, he will go to North Blue and bring Doflamingo to the North Blue. His head was smashed. Although he didn't know whether his stay in Donghai was fueled by Doflamingo, it didn't stop him from arranging all this on Doflamingo, who gave him only this one enemy. After I finish dealing with Vegapunk, I should go to New World. Maybe I will meet him on the sea then. Karen drank a cup of tea. Haha, I think he will be very happy then. After bidding farewell to the Warring States period, Karen came to his residence in Marine. This place was not Karen's dormitory in the training camp, but the new residence assigned to him by Zifa after he was promoted to Major General. Well, right next door to Zifa's house. This area is basically occupied by Lieutenant General Marine, and I don't know how Zifa arranged for himself to be here. Push gate of opening. The voices of Yuta and Zifa appeared in Karen's ears. Ha ha ha, Yuta sings so beautifully. I will have others. Yuta is so awesome. What are you singing? Karen approached the two of them and asked curiously. It was Karen who taught me the little swallow. Yuta looked innocent, seeing that even people in a bad mood could forget their unhappiness. What's more, she can also sing. You said the song just now was taught to you by Karen. Zifa opened his mouth wide. He listened to that song. It was very nice. He had never heard it before. Do you know these things? Karen touched her nose awkwardly, be a little more knowledgeable. You know, after having children, you will passively master many skills. Zifa nodded with deep understanding, he could sing before. Hey, Karen is amazing. He can also sing Two Tigers, Little Rabbit, Be Good. Yuta wanted to show off Karen's excellence to Zifa, and she listed many children's songs in succession. Grandpa Zifa, can you do it? Yuta blinked and looked at Zifa expectantly. Zifa was speechless, but looking at Yuta's expectant eyes, he gritted his teeth and smiled bravely. Of course I can, ha ha, ha ha. Then you can sing. 1 master and 3 apprentices. Ha ha ha. Karen standing aside couldn't help but laugh out loud. He almost thought Yuta was talking about little stars. Why are you laughing? Zifa looked at Karen with a resentful look. He felt that his whole body was not good. It's nothing, I thought of something funny, you continue. Karen sat down on the sofa and watched the interaction between the grandfather and grandson with interest. Can you do it? Yuta shook Zifa's arm, with an expectant look on his face that made Zifa unable to say no, but he really didn't know how to be a master and 3 apprentices, and he had never heard of it. So, he shook his head, sorry, I don't know this song. Yuta was not disappointed, but his eyes lit up, and he said in a sweet voice, Grandpa Zifa knows that song. I'm Little Marine. Zifa pondered for a moment, thinking through all the melodies in his mind. It's a song that fits Zifa's image very well. Then can you let Yuta listen? Yuta is very interested in music. She has been surrounded by music since she was a child. Yes, it's okay, this old man, who had seen too many killings on the battlefield and was not nervous, was actually trembling when he spoke at this moment. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and tried to relax. I'm a little marine, driving a little gunboat. Don't be afraid of wind or waves, move forward bravely. The gunboats moved fast and the cannons aimed accurately. If the enemy dares to invade, we will beat him with such force that he will sink to the bottom of the sea. I was a little nervous at first, but then I sang more and more naturally. As expected of a marine general, I sang this song with great momentum. Yet. Yuta clapped her hands excitedly and smiled very happily. Grandpa Zifa, you sing so well. Karen also clapped and sang really well. Zifa was slightly stunned. He didn't expect Yuta to praise him so much, and felt warm in his heart. That's right, I have been singing this song since I was a child. Yes, it sounds very good, especially the phrase boom boom boom. Karen imitated Zifa's voice and performed it vividly. Ha ha ha. Karen couldn't hold it back and laughed out loud. Zifa rolled his eyes and smiled at Yuta. Little Yuta, did you just say that these songs were taught to you by Karen? Yes. But Grandpa has never heard Karen sing. Can you let Karen sing again? Okay. I haven't heard Karen sing for a long time. Then, Yuta looked at Karen expectantly. Karen's smile froze on her face. Chapter 98. Comfortable. Ha ha ha, it sounds so good. Zifa imitated Karen and winked at Karen. Karen held her forehead, but she didn't expect Zifa to be so revengeful. Okay, it's getting late, let's go out to eat together. Zifa stood up from the ground, straightened his clothes, and prepared to leave with Karen. But he found that Yuta didn't move. What's wrong, Yuta? Zifa asked with concern. I don't want to eat outside, I want to eat Karen's cooking. Yuta pouted her mouth and looked at Karen expectantly. Can you still cook? Won't. Karen answered decisively. He didn't want Zifa to appear in that ugly state. Then why? She was talking about snacks. Is that so? Zifa felt something was wrong, and then he bent down and asked Yuta, what delicious food does Karen usually cook for you? There are a lot of them, the kind of food that glows. Yuta's eyes appeared in the shape of stars, as if she was caught up in beautiful memories. Glow? Zifa's head was filled with questions. Just when he was about to ask, Yuta seemed to have thought of something and suddenly realized. I understand, Grandpa, you are not the eldest sister, so you can't eat Karen's cooking. She looked at Zifa with a look of pity, and her tone was a little disappointed. It's such a pity that Grandpa can't eat Karen's cooking. The doubts in Zifa's heart deepened. What does it mean that the eldest sister cannot eat the food cooked by Karen? He glanced at Karen suspiciously. Karen's food is amazing. After eating it, you take off your clothes. Yuta. Karen quickly stopped her, fearing that Yuta would say something bad. Take off your clothes. Yuta nodded and said nothing. With big sister. Yuta continued to nod. Zifa looked at Karen with something very wrong. He coughed lightly and asked, what did you give them to eat? After a pause, he continued, don't you know how to avoid suspicion? You can't do it in front of your children. Karen's face was full of black lines. What is this and what? He sighed, knowing that there was no explanation today, and his image in Zifa's heart would probably have completely changed. No, I didn't. Teacher, please listen to my explanation. Shut up and let Yuta talk. Zifa glared at Karen. He still believed what the child saw more. After all, children can't lie. Yuta, tell me, what else did they do after taking off their clothes? Yuta looked at Karen. Karen nodded helplessly. Yuta blinked, not seeming to realize that the situation had become a bit awkward. She thought seriously for a moment, and then said, they become very comfortable. She really didn't know how to describe it. Thinking back to how Jun and Dalika behaved after eating, she could only describe it as comfortable. Comfortable. Yes, they will make aha sounds. Yuta is very talented in language, and her imitation is very vivid. Then she seemed to think of something and looked at Zifa suspiciously. No, I remember Grandpa Garp also ate Karen's food. What? And Garp? Zifa's voice suddenly rose an octave higher, and he felt that his three views were shattered. Is he comfortable too? Yes. Yuta looked innocent and said excitedly, I also feel very comfortable and delicious. You also? Zifa also felt something was wrong when he heard this. No matter what happened, Karen would not be able to use medicine on Garp, not to mention that even Yuta had taken it. What on earth is going on? He was a little confused, then turned his attention to Karen. Is what she said true? Karen could only admit it. He nodded, shook his head, and said helplessly, it's true, but it's not true either. Then he explained, that's accurate, but that's not what I meant. What does that mean? Karen gritted his teeth, knowing that Zifa had to eat it himself to explain clearly. I'll do it now. With that said, he turned and ran to the kitchen, leaving Zifa alone in the living room. There is a kitchen in his room, and there are many kitchen utensils and ingredients. In order to prevent Zifa from waiting too long, he is going to make a simple fried noodles. Zi la. Hot oil was poured on the chili powder, and the aroma was fragrant. Karen took the chopsticks and began to stir. This time he did not choose to cover up the dazzling fragrance with a hijab. After a while, Karen came out with 3 bowls of fried noodles. Zifa had long been so aroused by the aroma that he could no longer walk. Although he was playing with Yuta on the surface, his peripheral vision was always staring in the direction of the kitchen. Even now, he still can't imagine that Karen made this scent. Until the bowl of oily noodles was placed in front of him. Is this really what you did? Zifa looked at the bowl of noodles in front of him. It was just like what Yuta had described. It was emitting an alluring light. Replacement guaranteed. So you will really take off your clothes after eating it? Will it also make you feel comfortable? Karen was silent for a while and nodded. Yuta on the side couldn't wait for a long time. She took out her chopsticks and ate with relish. While eating, he praised, "Wow, wow, this is great. Why is she okay?" Zifa asked. Karen was also helpless when it came to this. He thought that anyone who ate his food would look ugly, but Yuta didn't. It's not just Yuta. He has tested it over the years. There is a range in this judgment. People older than 18 years old behave completely differently from those younger than 18 years old. Only people over 18 years old will burst into tears after eating the food he cooks, while others will only find it delicious and have no other side effects at all. Maybe it's because this ability is more afraid of criminal law. She is still young. Karen explained vaguely, and then made a gesture of invitation to Zifa. Zifa picked up the fried noodles and was about to taste it, but was stopped by Yuta's look. Yuta looked at Zifa in surprise. "Grandpa, why don't you go out to eat?" The older sisters she knew would take them to their rooms to eat, but Garp would take them away directly. Zifa was about to refuse, but found that Karen had already left with his own meal. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly, and he hesitated for a moment before choosing an empty room. After a while, Karen and Zifa came out with flushed faces. They looked at each other and both smiled bitterly. "Brew, brew, brew." The voice of the phone bug came out. Zifa took it out from his arms and connected it. "This is Zifa. Instructor, we have received news that there is a group of supernova pirates making trouble in the Sabayati Islands. We are short of manpower and need your support." Dominic's voice came from the phone bug. "Okay, I'll be there soon." "Yes. Gaba." The phone was hung up, and Zifa turned to look at Karen. "Let me see if you have been idle in the past 2 years." Karen smiled slightly. "You won't be disappointed." Chapter 99. Crazy Pig Pirates. Sabayati Islands, Island number 9. The whole island is composed of 79 trees, and each tree has towns and facilities. People call the archipelago of these 79 islands the Sabayati Islands. Each island is divided into blocks, and island number 9 is where criminals gather. There are human trafficking shops and human auctions everywhere. Of course it's legal here. Although there are Marines stationed here, the world government is really in charge of this place. Marine is actually just playing the role of a thug here. When a world noble is bullied here, Marine will come in handy, which I have to say is really ironic. This place is not far from the Marine headquarters. Dominia came here with the students who passed today for a simple dinner. They were sitting in a box on the 2nd floor, and the atmosphere was very harmonious. "Ha ha ha, you guy, why do you always get utensils on your face?" One of the recruiters pointed at a tall, tough, muscular Marine with a hooded head who always wore sunglasses. Jarhead Marine was smiling, and he said blankly, "Is there any?" As he spoke, the knife and fork on his face moved up and down, looking very funny. "Ha ha ha, it's so funny, I remember your name. Virgo." Jarhead Marine reminded, "My name is Virgo." Yes, Virgo, you are such an interesting person." This Marine laughed so loudly that he couldn't stop coughing, making people afraid that he would cough up the next second. "Hey, that's weird, where are my tableware?" Fergo shook his body from side to side, looking for his tableware. Ha ha ha. The whole place burst into laughter, and the atmosphere was relaxed and happy. Virgo, you guy, tableware is for eating, not for decorating your face. A recruit joked, with a playful light in his eyes. Fergo smiled slightly, stretched out his hand and touched the knife and fork on his face, with a grateful face. Thank you, I found it, it turned out to be here. I think you should eat finger food, maybe then you don't have to look for your cutlery. Donamika said half-jokingly, and everyone couldn't help but laugh. Good idea. Virgo nodded seriously and responded with a smile, I'll try it next time. The smile on his face was full of sincerity and looked particularly sunny. Although he looks strong and majestic on the outside, he looks particularly kind and cute at this moment. There was laughter all around, and Fergo's sense of humor and self-deprecation brought everyone closer and broke the barriers between recruits. At this moment, there was a boom, and Dominic felt a vibration coming from downstairs, and the entire hotel was shaking slightly. The laughter was interrupted instantly, and all the recruits' eyes were focused on the downstairs. I saw a group of people dressed as pirates walking in. Their arrival was like a strong wind, instantly tearing the originally cheerful atmosphere to pieces. Those guys wearing shabby pirate costumes and with stubble on their faces all looked arrogant, with an air of unscrupulousness in their eyes. Among them, the first person is the most eye-catching. He has a strong body, rough skin, and obvious muscle lines. There are protruding fangs and a wide nose on his face, and there is a tattoo depicting a wild boar on his right arm. It's the Crazy Pig Pirates. In front is their leader, Mad Boar Axel, a pirate supernova with a bounty of 173 million. It seems that this guy is going to the New World. What's so good about it? I heard that the great secret treasure is in New World. The diners whispered in the air, and the tense atmosphere became more solemn at this moment. The arrival of the Crazy Pig Pirates was obviously not a good thing. Their momentum made the atmosphere in the entire hotel instantly tense and uneasy. Crazy Pig Axel was very satisfied with everyone's reaction. He liked being watched in fear by so many people. Ha ha ha, very good. It seems that you recognize me, so I won't introduce myself. I am here today only for 3 things. His voice was as loud as thunder, as if it was going to shake the entire hotel. Listen. The first thing is that we are very hungry now, so I need a lot of food. He locked his eyes on the waiter in the lobby. The sweat on the waiter's face was like spring water. He said tremblingly, Okay, I understand. Humph, very good. The second thing is that we have traveled thousands of miles to come here, and our money has been almost exhausted, so I hope you will sponsor me a little. When I find the big secret treasure, I will not forget your kindness. He announced loudly, his voice echoing in the bar, with a sense of oppression and arrogance. TCH, to put it bluntly, isn't it still robbery? A diner whispered, and although his voice was very small, it was still captured by the Mad Pig Axel in this silent restaurant. Bingo, if you get the right answer, it's robbery, so I'll give you a reward. He lengthened his voice deliberately and exaggeratedly, as if he was a little worried about what to reward. Then, he slapped his head and said with a cruel smile, I'll give you a good reward. All right. As he spoke, he took out a small hammer from his arms and threw it directly at the person who spoke before. Pang! That head suddenly burst open like a watermelon, splattering bright red blood and brains everywhere. The surrounding diners were instantly frightened to the point of distorting their faces and shrieking in terror as they backed away. It all happened so fast that Dominic, who was upstairs, didn't even react. As soon as he hung up the phone, he saw that bloodshed had already occurred. Hateful! One of them, Marine, was about to open the door and jump out. Dominic grabbed his wrist and said in a deep voice. Don't be impulsive yet, I'm afraid we alone are no match for him. The pirates with a bounty of 173 million are very powerful even in the New World. It's not because Dominic is afraid of blocking these Marine recruits, but because he doesn't dare to let these students who finally passed the examination fail here. Their future must not stop here. Are you just looking at it like this? We are Marines. The recruit was aggrieved when his wrist was grabbed. Yes, instructor, we are Marines. Most of the recruits looked at Dominic anxiously, including Fergo. There was a glint in Dominic's eyes. If he were alone, he would have done it, but now he was responsible for Marine's future. But he knew that if he remained indifferent, these recruits would be disappointed and question Marine. He slowly closed his eyes, then opened them suddenly, and said in a deep voice, "You go find support. That's yours." Dominic took out a cigarette from his arms, lit it, took a deep breath, and exhaled a cloud of white smoke. Then, he placed the cigarette he had taken a puff on the table and said calmly, "Leave this to me." Chapter 100. Arrival at Sabayati Islands. Lord Colonel. Jesse gave Karen a standard military salute, his eyes full of reverence. Then, he turned to Zifa who was aside, saluted again, and said respectfully, "Hello, General." From this series of actions, it can be clearly seen that in Jesse's mind, Karen's status is obviously higher than that of Zifa. After all, Karen has always been the one he follows and the one he admires. Ahem. Karen coughed twice, pointed to the brand new medal on his chest, and said in a calm tone, "Call me Major General." Jesse was stunned for a moment, but he quickly came to his senses and immediately changed his words. "Okay, Major General." His eyes sparkled with excitement and pride. "Very good." Karen patted Jesse on the shoulder and pretended to be serious. "A larger position means greater responsibility. I hope you can remember this, Jesse Lieutenant Junior Grade." "Understood, Hi." Jesse agreed subconsciously, and then discovered what Karen called him. He looked at Karen in disbelief and said in shock, "Lieutenant Junior Grade." Karen nodded with a smile on his face. He would naturally not forget to mention his subordinates after he was promoted. Moreover, Jesse has been very serious in working under him in the past 2 years, and Karen has given him the training of 6 postures and armed colors. But his qualifications are not very good, and he has only learned 2 of the 6 moves in the past 2 years. "Thank you, Major General, I will never forget it," Jesse said solemnly. "Fight for justice." "Just fight for yourself," Karen corrected. "Ah? Okay." Although Jesse didn't know Karen's intention, he still nodded seriously. Zifa frowned slightly, but didn't say much. He just asked himself in his heart, "Are you fighting for yourself?" "Well, very good, ready to leave for the Sabayati Islands." "Yes, Major General." This is the second time that Karen and Zifa have left the headquarters together on a warship. I recall that the last time was not long after he entered the elite training camp. In order to avenge him, Zifa deliberately collected information about the Blade Pirates, and was finally able to let Karen take revenge with your own hands. The last target was also in the direction of the Sabayati Islands, but it was not the Sabayati Islands, but the islands near the Sabayati Islands. This time the target is the Sabayati Islands. The importance of this island in the plot is self-evident. One Piece has 2 stages, one 2 years ago and 2 years later. The end point 2 years ago and the starting point 2 years later are the Sabayati Islands. "What are you thinking about?" Zifa suddenly approached Karen and asked. "I was thinking about the last time." Karen came back to her senses and said softly. "Time flies so fast." Zifa sighed, with a look of nostalgia on his face, and then joked, "You were still a young boy last time, of course, and you are still now. The only difference is that I am old." Zifa rarely puts the word old on his lips, but when he saw Yuta, he had to admit that time is not forgiving and he is no longer young. He is an old man with a granddaughter. Time flies by and the once high-spirited general has now become an old man. Many times people are like this. With support and bonds, people will become sentimental. "No way, I think the teacher is still very young." Karen quickly comforted. Go, brat, I don't need you to comfort me." Zifa laughed and scolded, pushing Karen. A trace of relief and satisfaction flashed in his eyes. "Sometimes it's not a bad thing to realize that you are old," Zifa said with emotion. "Because it means that you have experienced a lot and have valuable experiences and memories." Zifa's tone became gentle, with a nostalgic light shining in his eyes, "and these are things that you young people cannot understand." Karen was stunned for a moment, and sighed secretly in his heart, "I didn't expect teacher Zifa's mentality to be so good." It seems that Yuta's arrival has indeed changed him a lot, but this side confirms that my choice is correct. He knew that Zifa had been in great pain. The trauma of losing his family and the memories of the past had made him miserable and lonely. The appearance of Yuta is like a ray of sunshine, illuminating Zifa's dark inner world. He had heard before that the innocence and kindness of children could unknowingly heal the inner wounds of adults, and that music was a powerful healing force. Yuta is not just a child, her singing is like a clear spring, which can nourish the dry soul and make people feel warmth and hope again. I've learned a lesson, teacher. Karen said seriously. Haha, remember, being young does not mean ignorance, and getting old does not mean losing vitality. Zifa patted Karen on the shoulder. Every generation has its own mission. You young people must be brave to pursue your dreams, and we old guys must support you from behind. If I fight against the world government, will you help me? Karen secretly complained in his heart, his face straightened, and he said seriously. I will, teacher. At this moment, the ship's broadcast sounded, and Jesse's voice came, all personnel are preparing, we are about to arrive at the Sabayati Islands, please be prepared to welcome us. Meanwhile on the other side. Boom! Dominic's figure flew upside down for more than 10 meters. Blood slowly overflowed from the corner of his mouth, and Dominic struggled to stand up, trying to steady himself. Ha ha ha, is this the Marine from Marine's headquarters? It's nothing more than that. Crazy Pig Axel stood in front of Dominic, with a mocking smile on his lips. You Marines are not worth mentioning in my eyes. It really disappoints me. He proudly looked down at Dominic who fell on the ground, his eyes full of contempt. Dominic clenched his fists and stared at the mad pig Axel with gritted teeth. Shut up, pirate. As he spoke, the surface of his skin was gradually covered with black domineering energy, like a layer of mysterious armor, wrapping him tightly. This is the armament haki he honed in training 2 years ago, which can enhance his strength and defense, and also allow him to focus more in battle. It's just that his domineering power hasn't increased much compared to 2 years ago. He can only wind and harden it. He has always been very clear that his talent is not good. After several years of hard training, Karen defeated him in just a few months. Domineering? Humph, that's ridiculous. Axel looked at Dominic contemptuously, with a sneer on his lips. Do you think this little trick can scare me? His body is also wrapped in the domineering black energy, which is much darker than Dominic's. Come on, show me your strength. Axel laughed loudly and rushed towards Dominic like a strong wind. His fists carried strong air currents and rushed towards him. Dominic took a deep breath, mobilized the strength of his whole body, and punched out with both fists. The domineering energy condensed on his fists, like a black cannonball, facing Axel's attack. Boom! The fists of the two collided in the air, making a deafening sound. The air seemed to be torn apart in an instant, and the surrounding ground was shaking due to the fluctuation of power. Dominic felt a huge impact, and then his figure flew out and landed hard on the ground. Is this what you call strength? Axel walked steadily towards Dominic, who was lying on the ground. The sarcasm on his face became more and more obvious. It's really ridiculous. If that's the case, then you go, die.